The mafia boss let his wife fall to save her adopted sister. He never expected her to return alive. Adrian Vale pulled the lever. He watched the wooden platform collapse beneath his pregnant wife's feet. He watched her fall toward the black Atlantic water 60 feet below. He watched her disappear into the dark, and he stood there, a man who had ordered executions without blinking, and he did not move. He had chosen the other woman, his wife's adopted sister, a woman clutching a ledger page that supposedly named the man who destroyed his family. He chose evidence over Evelyn. He chose power over the mother of his unborn child. And in that single moment, standing above the crashing waves with rain cutting across his face, Adrian Vale, the most feared mafia boss on the eastern seaboard, realized he had just made the worst decision of his life. He simply didn't know yet that she survived. If this kind of story grips you, the kind where love isn't enough, where power costs everything, and where the woman everyone counted out walks back in through the front door, then hit subscribe right now and stay with us until the very end. Drop a like, leave a comment telling me what city or country you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels, because what comes next will change everything you thought you knew about Evelyn Cross. The morning it all started, 9 days before the lighthouse. Evelyn Cross was carrying a secret that made her hands shake every time she sat down to dinner. She was 11 weeks pregnant. She had known for 3 weeks. She had planned to tell Adrian on a Thursday evening quiet dinner, just the two of them, none of the security detail hovering near the hallway. She had even written the card, tucked it into the pocket of his jacket while he slept. But Adrian had left before dawn that morning for a meeting that ran 16 hours, and when he came home, he went straight to the study and didn't come out until she was already in bed, pretending to sleep. Then Friday became Saturday. Saturday slipped into Sunday, and every time Evelyn found a moment that felt right, something in the room shifted his phone. A call from his father, a problem with the docs, and the moment died before it started. She was still holding the card in her dresser drawer. The Lauren estate sat on a hill outside the city, all stone and glass and money, spent on making history look like it belonged to you. Evelyn had grown up not knowing this place existed. She had grown up not knowing Charles Laurent was her father. She had been 6 years old when someone had decided she needed to disappear, and she had spent the next 22 years without a last name that meant anything. She did not love this house. She had never loved this house. But she had learned to move through it without letting it see her flinch. And that was something. Sunday dinner at the Laurent estate meant 12 people around a table that could have seated 30, crystal glasses that no one actually liked, but everyone pretended to appreciate, and conversation that was never really conversation. It was negotiation wearing a dinner jacket. Evelyn sat across from Vivian Laurent. Vivian was 31, 2 years older than Evelyn, and she had grown up inside this house, knowing exactly who she was and what she stood to inherit. She had Charles's jawline and her mother's precision, and she had a way of watching Evelyn that wasn't hostile exactly. It was more like she was waiting for something to be confirmed. Evelyn had tried. She had genuinely tried with Vivian. She had believed, for almost a year after Charles brought her home, that Vivian was someone she could eventually trust. She had started thinking of her as a sister. She had started acting like one. She wasn't sure when that changed. She wasn't sure it had been one moment. It felt more like weather, like waking up and realizing the temperature had dropped 10 degrees while you were sleeping, and you couldn't pinpoint exactly when. Adrian sat beside Evelyn, close enough that she could feel the warmth of his arm, but his eyes were on his phone, and had been for most of the meal. He was a large man, broad through the shoulders, with the kind of stillness that people in his world learned to read like a barometer. When Adrian was still, it didn't mean he was relaxed. It meant he was computing. He was always computing. Evelyn reached for her water glass and let her other hand rest against her stomach for just a second, just long enough to ground herself, and she thought, tonight I tell him. It had to be tonight. Then Vivian made a small sound and tipped sideways in her chair. Not a dramatic fall, not a collapse that announced itself. She simply went sideways, like a building settling, and her shoulder struck the edge of the table, and her wineglass hit the floor, and suddenly everyone was standing, and the dinner was over. Charles Laurent was on his feet before the glass finished breaking. Vivian. His voice had nothing in it, no panic, just command, the way a man speaks when he expects the world to answer him. The family physician was called. He came within 7 minutes, which told Evelyn that he was always close by, always on call, because this was a family that planned for contingencies even at dinner. They moved Vivian to the sitting room. Evelyn stood near the doorway with Adrian's hand at the small of her back, and she watched Doctor. Halstead examined Vivian's medications, the small amber bottles she kept in her purse. He opened one. He checked the color of the capsules inside. He looked at them under the light for a long moment. "These aren't her prescription," he said. The room went very quiet. Halstead looked up. "These are a sedative. A strong one." He turned the bottle over. "The label is correct. The dosage is printed right, but the capsules inside are not what was dispensed." Charles turned. And the way he turned, slow and deliberate, moving his gaze around the room, the way a searchlight moves, Evelyn felt it before it landed on her. "Evelyn," Charles said, "I need you to open your handbag." She didn't understand at first, then she did. And the understanding moved through her like cold water, because she already knew what was going to happen, even before her hands found the clasp and opened the bag. And there, nested between her phone case and a folded receipt, was a small amber bottle with Vivian's name on it. Vivian's actual medication, the real capsules, inside Evelyn's bag. She heard the room react before she heard any individual voice. It was one sound, the collective intake of something, not quite air, more like certainty. "I didn't put that there," Evelyn said. She said it plainly. She did not scramble. She did not raise her voice. She had learned long ago that scrambling looked like guilt, even when it wasn't, and she had spent enough years surviving on her own instincts to know that the first thing you did in a room that had turned against you was stand still and speak clearly. "I did not put that in my bag." Charles looked at her the way he always looked at her, like he was waiting for her to prove something she didn't know she owed him. Adrian's hand had dropped from her back. She felt that more than anything else in the room, his hand just dropped. "We'll investigate privately," Adrian said. His voice was careful, controlled. "Evelyn, until we understand what happened, I think it's best if you apologize to Vivian." "Adrian, it's the appropriate thing. I said I didn't do it." He looked at her then, and she saw at the small tight line around his mouth that meant he had already made a calculation. And the calculation had not come out in her favor. He wasn't angry at her. He wasn't even cold. He was just managing, processing. And in that moment, she understood that she was a problem he was handling, not a wife he was defending. "Apologize," he said quietly. "Please," she didn't. She stood there for another 10 seconds, long enough to make clear that the silence was a choice. Then she excused herself from the room. That night, Adrian slept in the guest room. Evelyn sat on the edge of their bed, with one hand pressed flat against her stomach, not moving, just there. She stayed that way for a long time, long enough for the house to go completely silent around her. She did not cry. She had given up crying in rooms where no one was listening a long time ago. What she did instead was pick up her phone and contact Marcus Rourke. Marcus was not a friend exactly. He was not an employee. He was the kind of person who existed in the spaces between legitimate and illegitimate, who had access to information that did not travel through official channels, and who owed Evelyn a debt she had never collected. She had helped him once, 3 years before she met Adrian, when she was still living under her original name and her original silence, and Marcus had never forgotten it the way some people forget debts they no longer need to repay. She sent him a message. "I need you to test something. I'll explain more tomorrow." Then she lay down on top of the covers in her clothes and did not sleep. By 7 the next morning, she had left the estate, driven herself to the city, and handed Marcus the capsule she had extracted from Vivian's replacement bottle. His lab contact returned results in 4 hours. The capsule contained a fast-acting sedative at a dosage designed to incapacitate within 20 minutes. The compound was not available at retail pharmacies. It was clinical grade, the kind used in controlled medical procedures. The payment trace Marcus ran on the medical foundation that had supplied it led to an account connected to Charles Laurent's private charitable organization. Evelyn read the report 3 times. Then Marcus showed her the second piece. Someone had accessed her prenatal records, not the records from her general physician, the specific records from Dr. Anaya Singh's, the obstetrician she had seen quietly, off books, using a name that should not have existed in his system. Charles or Adrian, or anyone in either family would have known to search. Someone knew she was pregnant, and someone had been careful enough to make those records hard to find, which meant they knew making them hard to find was necessary, which meant they had known she would be careful, which meant they had been watching her, long before she understood she was being watched. "How long?" she asked Marcus. "The access timestamp is 6 weeks ago," he said. She had been 8 weeks pregnant 6 weeks ago. She had not told anyone. She had been seeing Dr. Singh for 4 weeks at that point, attending early appointments before work, paying in cash, using the name she'd kept from before Charles found her. 6 weeks ago, someone had known before she was ready to know that they knew. She drove back to the estate with her hands steady on the wheel and her chest feeling like something had taken up residence there that had no intention of leaving. Adrian met her in the entry hall. He had the look of a man who had been awake most of the night and didn't want to show it. "I need to speak with you," he said. "Good. I need to speak with you too." He closed the study door behind them. On his desk was a manila folder. He didn't open it immediately. He set both hands on either side of it on the desk and looked at her the way he looked at situations he didn't want to have to manage. "A paternity report was submitted to the family council this morning," he said. The floor didn't move, but it felt like it did. "I didn't authorize a paternity test," she said. "The report exists, Adrian. I did not authorize a paternity test." "How would there even be a test you and I haven't?" She stopped. Something cold moved through her. What samples were used? It references material collected during a prenatal visit. She felt the cold spread from her chest down into her hands. "I have never had a paternity test run. I have never given consent for anyone to use my medical samples for anything except standard prenatal care." She held herself very still. "Someone stole something from me." She called Dr. Singh from the study, right there, with Adrian watching. The doctor confirmed it immediately. No paternity test had been ordered. No additional genetic testing had been authorized. But when they pulled the intake log from Evelyn's last appointment, there was a discrepancy. 3 blood vials had been logged for collection. 4 had been checked out of the specimen storage by a technician named on the sheet as Graham Mercer, Charles Laurent's private assistant. Adrian's jaw tightened in the way it did when he was revising a conclusion he had already committed to. He didn't apologize for the folder on the desk. He didn't say anything about it. But he picked up his phone and called for Graham immediately. Graham Mercer's line was disconnected. His office on the Laurent estate was empty, not cleared out, just empty, the way a space looks when someone has taken only what they needed and moved fast. The estate security footage from the previous night showed Graham walking out through the east gate at 2:47 a.m. with a travel bag. A flight manifest pulled from the private terminal showed a departure at 4:15 a.m. on a Gulfstream registered to a holding company connected to Minjay Vale's transportation network, Adrian's father. The silence in the study lasted a very long time. Evelyn watched Adrian absorb this. She watched him process the architecture of it the way someone who thinks in structures processes information, building the shape of it before he addressed any individual piece. "Your father's plane," she said. "I see it. Graham Mercer stole my blood. He created a false paternity report. He had access to my private medical files." She leaned forward slightly. "And he left on your father's plane. I'm not defending my father. I'm not asking you to defend him. I'm asking you to stop defending a version of this situation that makes me the problem." Her voice didn't shake. She was proud of that. Later, that her voice didn't shake. "Because I am not the problem, Adrian. Someone inside this family has been building a case against me for weeks. They knew about my pregnancy before I told anyone. They knew which clinic I was using. And whatever they're planning, it's not finished." He looked at her for a long moment. "I believe you," he said. "Do you?" "I believe someone is manipulating the situation." "That's not the same thing, Evelyn. That is not the same thing as believing me." She picked up her bag from the chair she'd set it. "When you figure out the difference, let me know." She left the study before he could answer. By afternoon, Marcus had located a secondary financial trail, payments moving through 3 offshore accounts over the past 4 months, eventually traceable to a common origin point, a succession document signed by Charles Laurent and Minjay Vale 18 months ago. Marcus sent the document summary without commentary. Evelyn read it standing in a parking structure on the south side of the city. The document outlined a temporary transfer arrangement. If Evelyn's position within the Laurent structure became the language was contested or vacant, her voting shares would pass to Vivian during the period of resolution. The document was contingent on several conditions. One of them was Evelyn's continued status as the primary Laurent heir. Her son, if he existed, would complicate that. She had to grip the steering wheel to keep her hands from moving. Noah. She had already started calling him Noah in her head. She hadn't told anyone that either. It had just happened the way certain things happen when you're carrying a life inside you, and you're alone with it for weeks, and you start needing something to call it. Her son would inherit before Vivian. Her son would change the entire succession map. Someone had known that before she'd even told his father he was real. She was still sitting in the parking structure, trying to work out the next move when her phone rang. It was Vivian. "I know where Graham went," Vivian said. Her voice sounded shaken, genuinely shaken. The kind of shaken that is hard to fake over a phone call. He's at a hotel in the city. Adrian's with him, Adrian. I know how it sounds. I know. But I think they're meeting because Min-jae sent Graham specifically to speak with Adrian before anyone else could find him. I think they're keeping something from both of us. A pause. I'm outside the hotel now. I think you should come. Every instinct she had said no. She went anyway. Because the chance that it was real, that Vivian was genuinely scared, that this was a betrayal that had targeted both of them, was still a chance she didn't want to waste. Because she was still someone who wanted to believe in the possibility of being wrong about people. Vivian picked her up on the corner, 2 blocks from the parking structure. Rain had started by the time Evelyn got in the passenger seats noon. The city looked gray and smeared through the windshield. They drove for 6 minutes without speaking. Then Evelyn asked, "How did you know which hotel?" Vivian hesitated just slightly. "Just a half second. Graham texted me before he left. He said if anything happened to him, I should tell someone. He gave me the location. He texted you, but you didn't tell anyone until now. I wasn't sure who to trust." Evelyn looked at the side of Vivian's face, at the way she held the wheel, at the particular quality of her stillness. "Vivian," Evelyn said carefully, "how did you know about my pregnancy?" The car swerved. Not dramatically, just a small involuntary correction, the kind the body makes when the mind stumbles. "What? My obstetrician's records were accessed 6 weeks ago. I told no one. I used a different name. I paid cash. The only way someone knew is if they'd been watching me very closely for months." She kept her voice even. "How did you know? I don't know what you're... You called me this morning before the paternity report reached Adrian. You said, 'I hope you're taking care of yourself, Evelyn. Things like this are hard on a woman in your condition.' I thought it was a figure of speech. It wasn't, was it?" Vivian's hands tightened on the wheel. "Pull over," Evelyn said. Pull over the car." The bridge was ahead of them. The rain was heavy now. The guardrails on either side caught the headlights and threw them back, wet and pale. Vivian did not pull over. What happened in the next 4 seconds was chaotic and physical and very fast. Evelyn reached for the wheel. Vivian shoved her back, hard with one elbow. The car fishtailed on the wet surface. Evelyn grabbed the door handle as the vehicle struck the bridge railing, and the side window exploded inward, and then there was a sound like the world folding, like reality deciding to stop being organized about itself, and then there was nothing. She came back to consciousness in pieces, the ceiling of an emergency room, white and too bright, sound that didn't organize itself into words for a while. Cold. The specific cold of being unclothed in a room where the temperature is controlled for other purposes. Her hands moved before anything else. She reached for her stomach. The flatness of it hit her before the nurse's voice did. "Miss Cross." The nurse was young and her voice was too careful in the way that voices get when they have been told to be careful. "You were in a vehicle accident. You were unconscious when paramedics arrived." Evelyn's hands were still against her own stomach. "My son," she said. The nurse didn't answer for 1 second longer than she should have. That second was its own complete sentence. "There was an emergency delivery," the nurse said. "He arrived at 28 weeks. The neonatal team." She stopped. Started again. "He was with us for 6 hours. 6 hours. Noah had been in the world for 6 hours, and she had been unconscious through all of them. She had not been there. He had arrived and left the world, and she had not been in either moment with him. She did not make any sound. She did not cry. She lay completely still, with her hands flat against the place where he had been, and she breathed very fully and deliberately, the way you breathe when you've decided that the alternative is not acceptable. Adrian came into the room 40 minutes later. She knew he was there before she turned her head. She had always been able to tell by the particular quality of the silence he generated when he entered a space. He was holding a police report. He was holding the police report before he said her name. He had walked into the room where his wife lay in a hospital bed, having just lost their child, and he had the police report in his hand. "Vivian says you grabbed the wheel," he said. Evelyn turned her head and looked at him. He was not a bad man. She had never thought he was a bad man. He was a man who had been raised to organize everything, including grief, into something manageable and actionable. He processed loss the way he processed intelligence reports immediately, systematically, looking for the next move. But there was no next move for this. There was only what had happened. And he had walked in, holding a piece of paper, instead of reaching for her hand. "Get out," she said. "Evelyn, we need to discuss. Get out of this room." He didn't move. "I need to understand what happened on that bridge." She reached for the IV line in her arm, not to pull it out, just to have something in her hands. something to anchor her to the specific reality of the moment, so she didn't leave her body entirely. Your wife is lying in a hospital bed. Her voice was very quiet and very flat. Your son died 6 hours ago. You walked in here holding a police report. That is what happened. She looked at him steadily. I need you to leave this room. If you come back as my husband, not as someone who needs things understood. He left. He left her alone in the room. She waited until the door closed. Then she took off her wedding ring. The movement was deliberate, not frantic. She slid it off, held it in her palm for a moment, and set it on the bedside table beside Noah's empty hospital bracelet, the one they had made for him. She had not asked to keep it. The nurse had brought it without being asked. She held the bracelet, and she looked at the ring, and she decided something. She decided she was done, not done with fighting, done with being the person who absorbed consequences other people had manufactured, and still found ways to protect the men who stood aside while it happened. She was done with that version of herself. Her phone was cracked but functional. She typed a message to Marcus. I need everything you have on the succession document. Everything on Graham Mercer. Everything on Vivian. Don't filter. Send it all. Then she typed a second message also. I need to know who else knew about Noah. She called him Noah in the message. It was the first time she had said his name out loud to anyone. Even as just the word in a text sent to a man across the city at 1 a.m, from a hospital room that still smelled like the specific combination of antiseptic and helplessness, it cost her something. She pressed send. Then she lay back against the pillow and closed her eyes and stayed there. Not sleeping, just staying. Just keeping herself in the room, in the moment, in the body that had held her son for 6 hours, while she couldn't reach him. She stayed there all night. And the moment Evelyn Cross decided she was going to dismantle every single person who had built this trap around her, the conspiracy they had constructed so carefully, the one designed to make her look guilty, make her look unstable, make her disappear from her own life, began the slow process of making its first mistake. It had not counted on her surviving. It would not count on her remembering everything. And it had not even begun to understand what she was capable of when she had nothing left to lose and a name to fight for. A name that had lived for 6 hours. A name that deserved better than 6 hours. Marcus sent the files at 4:47 in the morning. Evelyn was already awake. She had not slept. She had lain in that hospital bed through the entire night, with her eyes open, and her hands folded over the flat place where her son had been, and she had listened to the hospital sounds, the distant rolling of carts, the muffled voices behind walls, the specific silence of a building that never fully sleeps, and she had waited. When the phone vibrated, she sat up immediately. The first file was the succession document in full. Not the summary Marcus had sent earlier, the actual document, 43 pages, dense with legal language that had been carefully designed to be unreadable without intention. Evelyn read it with a pen she'd found in the bedside drawer, marking margins on the back of a medical intake form, because she had nothing else. She read it the way she had taught herself to read difficult things, slowly, linearly, not skipping ahead, not letting the weight of what she suspected color what she was actually seeing. By page 11, she had found the clause. It was buried in a subsection about asset management during contested heirship periods. The language said that in the event of a primary heir's incapacitation, legal absence, or and here was the word that made her stop biological discontinuation of direct succession. The voting shares held by the primary Laurent heir would transfer temporarily to the nearest designated family representative. Designated family representative. The document named Vivian. It had been signed 18 months ago, 14 months before Evelyn had found out she was pregnant, which meant someone had anticipated this, or planned for it, or both. She kept reading. By page 29, she found the secondary clause. The temporary transfer would trigger, automatically, under one additional condition. If the primary heir produced a biological child, that child's existence would supersede the transfer arrangement. The shares would belong to the child in trust until majority. Noah would have superseded it. Noah's existence had been a legal problem for two people who had been very carefully building a financial arrangement for 18 months. She put the pen down. She picked it back up. She kept reading, because stopping was not something she was going to do. The second file Marcus sent was financial movement records. She could not follow all of it. Marcus had a particular shorthand in his annotations, and she had to text him twice to clarify entries, but the shape of it was clear enough. Money had moved through 3 separate offshore structures over 4 months. The accounts converged at a single management entity, a foundation she had never heard of, registered in the name of a woman she did not recognize, but controlled according to Marcus's note at the bottom of the summary by a signatory whose initials were C. L. Charles Laurent. Her father had been funding this for 4 months. She had been in this family for 2 years. She had eaten at his table. She had let him walk her through the estate and name the rooms and explain the history like he was giving her something instead of reclaiming an asset. She put the phone face down on the blanket. She breathed. Then she picked the phone back up and texted Marcus, "I need to be discharged today." "Can you send someone to drive me?" he replied, in under 2 minutes, already outside. She dressed slowly. Because her body was not entirely cooperative, the delivery had been emergencies, and she was 24 hours out of it, and her body was making its own demands. She did not call a nurse. She found her clothes in the closet where they had been bagged, still faintly damp from the rain on the bridge. She put them on anyway. She stopped at the nurse's station on the way out and signed the voluntary discharge papers. The nurse on duty, not the careful young one from the night before, a different one, older, with a face that stopped apologizing for hard news years ago, looked at her over the forms. "You have someone taking you?" "Yes, you're going to need to rest." Evelyn signed the last line. "I know, I mean actual rest, not whatever the look on your face is." Evelyn handed back the clipboard. "Thank you for last night," she said. "The bracelet. I didn't ask for it, and someone brought it. That was thank you." She left before the nurse could respond. Marcus's car was a gray sedan, deliberately unremarkable. He was in the driver's seat, and he did not say anything when she got in. He did not ask how she was feeling, or tell her she looked terrible, or perform any of the social rituals that would have required her to respond to them. He just put the car in drive. They drove for 10 minutes. Then she said, "Vivian knew about the pregnancy before the crash." "I know." "How long have you known?" "I suspected 2 days ago. I confirmed it last night when I pulled her communication records." Evelyn turned to look at his profile. "You confirmed it while I was in the hospital and didn't tell me." "You were in the hospital, Marcus. You had just lost." He stopped. Started again, voice quieter. "I made a call. Maybe it was the wrong one. It was the wrong one." She turned back to the window. "Don't make calls for me. Tell me the information and let me decide what I do with it." "Understood. Say it like you mean it." "Understood." A beat. "I mean it." They drove in silence for another 5 minutes. The city moved past the windows in gray morning light, wet from the rain. Streets mostly empty at this hour. "Where are we going?" she asked. "I have a contact in property law. She's been tracking the Laurent Trust documentation for 6 months. She found something 2 hours ago." He glanced at her. "I thought you'd want to see it in person." "What kind of something?" "The kind that explains why Charles Laurent was so desperate to bring you home." The office was above a dry cleaner on the west side, up a flight of stairs that creaked on the 4th and 7th steps, through a door that had a good lock on it, which was the most Marcus had ever said about the security of any space he'd arranged. The woman inside was named Dara, and she was 60, with reading glasses on a chain around her neck, and the particular posture of someone who had spent decades bending over documents and had stopped caring what the bending cost her back. She spread a document across a folding table without preamble. "Your maternal grandfather," she said, "set up a trust in 1971. The primary beneficiary designation was, this is the language, the first biological Laurent grandchild to reach majority and establish legal identity." She tapped the page. "Laurent, not Vale, your mother's line, not Charles's. Your grandfather did not trust Charles. He specifically structured this to prevent Charles from controlling the trust directly." "What does the trust hold?" Evelyn asked. "At last valuation, approximately $412 million in assets." Dara's voice was completely even. It was the voice of a woman who had learned that numbers only destroyed people who weren't prepared for them, plus controlling interest in 3 subsidiaries of the Laurent Holding Company. The room was very quiet. "Charles was your grandfather's son-in-law," Dara continued. "He managed the trust and trust for the designated heir, meaning he had operational control but not ownership. He's been operating as though he owns those assets for 22 years. Because for 22 years, there was no heir to claim them." She looked at Evelyn over her reading glasses. "You were erased at 6 years old. Without a biological Laurent grandchild of legal age and established identity, Charles could continue managing and quietly extracting from the trust indefinitely. Until I came back," Evelyn said. "Until you came back. He found me. He had someone looking. Off and on for years, I think. And when they found you, he brought you home." Dara folded her hands over the document. "He brought you home because he needed to control the variable. Better to have you close, to manage your relationship with the inheritance, to shape how you understood your own claim, then to have you appear without warning with a lawyer. Marcus was standing near the wall, with his arms crossed and his eyes on Evelyn. She did not look at him. She looked at the document. And Noah, she said, a biological child of yours would have inherited in your place at majority. Your voting shares and trust for your child would have been managed by you as the parent, not by Charles. Dara paused. Your child's existence would have permanently removed Charles from any meaningful control of the trust assets. So he had to go, Evelyn said. The word sat in the room. The evidence suggests someone wanted to ensure your pregnancy either wasn't discovered or didn't continue, Dara said carefully. They made sure it didn't continue. Evelyn's voice was level. She kept it level by force of something that was not calm. It was the opposite of calm. It was something tighter and colder than calm. The thing that exists on the other side of grief, when grief has been compressed by enough pressure and for long enough. They engineered a car crash with my sister driving. She paused on the word sister, not letting it become ironic, just noting it. And they made sure my husband doubted me enough not to stand in front of it. Nobody spoke for a moment. Then Evelyn straightened up from the table. I need copies of everything. Already made. Dara slid a folder across the table. Evelyn picked it up. What do I owe you? Marcus takes care of it. Marcus doesn't pay my debts. She looked at Dara. Send me the invoice. Dara almost smiled. I will. Back in the car, Marcus drove without asking for a destination. Evelyn paged through the copied documents, her finger tracking lines, flagging pages with the pen she'd taken from the hospital. I need to go back to the estate, she said. No, Marcus, today. You were discharged 4 hours ago. Your body is, I know what my body is. She kept her eyes on the documents. I need to retrieve something from our bedroom. And I need to speak with someone on the household staff before anyone realizes I'm not still in the hospital. He was quiet for a moment. 2 hours, he said, in and out. I'll wait outside. I need the name of whoever on that staff has been reporting to Charles. I have a candidate. Then I need to speak with them before you do. Another pause. Why? Because if you speak with them first, I only get what you decide I need to know. She finally looked at him. I'm not operating through filters anymore. Not even yours. He absorbed this without expression. Then he changed direction at the next intersection. The Laurence estate had a north gate that the security detail didn't cover between 6 and 9 in the morning, a gap that existed because the shift handover happened at 7, and the new team spent the first 40 minutes organizing themselves and drinking coffee and had not yet settled into their pattern of the day. Evelyn knew this because she had spent 2 years living in this house, and she had learned its rhythms the way you learn any place you don't entirely feel safe in by watching it. She went through the north gate at 7:22. The staff member she needed was a woman named Petra, 53, who had worked in the Laurent household for 11 years, and who had, 3 months ago, started making small errors, a letter misplaced, a call logged at the wrong time, the kind of errors that looked like carelessness, but that Evelyn had noticed, because she noticed patterns in the way some people noticed weather. She found Petra in the East Hall carrying a stack of pressed linens. Petra saw her and went very still. I heard you were in the hospital, Petra said. I was. Evelyn did not slow down. She walked alongside Petra, matching her pace. I need to ask you one question, and I need a straight answer. Not a careful answer, not a protected answer, straight. Petra kept walking. Her hands tightened slightly on the linens. Who asked you to document my movements? Evelyn asked. Silence for 3 steps. For I have a family, Petra said quietly. I know you do. I'm not going to make that difficult. Evelyn kept walking. I need the name. Another 3 steps, Ms. Vivian, Petra said. 6 months ago. She wanted to know your schedule. Which days you left the estate alone. Which appointments you didn't list on the household calendar. 6 months ago. 5 months before Evelyn had even confirmed the pregnancy to herself. Did she ask for anything else? Petra hesitated. She asked me to note if I ever saw any medical supplies. Or pharmacy deliveries. Things that didn't match what was logged for the main household. They had reached the end of the hall. Petra stopped. Evelyn stopped beside her. Thank you, Evelyn said. Petra looked at her with the expression of someone who has been carrying something that was too heavy and has just been allowed to set it down. I'm sorry, she said. I didn't know what she... You don't need to explain it to me. Evelyn said it quietly and she meant it. You needed to protect your family. People do things for that reason that they wouldn't do otherwise. She paused. I'm going to need you to write down what you just told me. In your own words. I'll send someone for it this week. Just write it down and keep a copy somewhere that isn't here. Petra nodded. Evelyn went upstairs to the bedroom she had shared with Adrian. The room was exactly as she had left it. Nothing had been touched. The bed was still made from the morning she had been taken from the estate. Her things were on the dresser. Adrian's jacket was on the back of the chair near the window. The jacket she had slipped the card into weeks ago. She crossed to the dresser first and opened the second drawer and found the journal she kept there, not a diary, just a work journal, meeting notes and contact lists and financial observations she'd made over 2 years of being inside this family. She took it. Then she crossed to the jacket. She put her hand into the inside pocket. The card was still there. She pulled it out and looked at it. Her own handwriting, in the blue pen she used for personal things. "You're going to be a father. Try not to terrify him before breakfast." She had written it 3 weeks ago at the kitchen table at 7 in the morning while Adrian was still asleep, and she had been laughing a little while she wrote it, which was something she hadn't done in a while, just laughed alone, without it having to mean something. She folded the card very carefully. She put it in her own pocket. She didn't know why she took it instead of leaving it. She knew she wasn't going to show it to anyone. But she was not leaving it here. It was back through the north gate by 8:15. Marcus was parked where he said he'd be. He didn't ask what she'd found. She didn't tell him about the card. She told him about Petra. By noon, everything changed. Adrian called her cell phone at 12:07. She let it ring. He called again at 12:19. She answered on the second ring because she decided that not answering was its own kind of information she didn't want to give him yet. "Where are you?" he said. "Not at the estate." "Evelyn, you were discharged this morning. I came to the hospital." "I know. You didn't tell me you were leaving." "No." A pause. His breathing on the other end was controlled in the way his breathing got when he was managing himself carefully. She had learned his breath the way you learn another person's breath when you share a bed with them. Its rhythms, its variations, what the variations meant. "I found the nursery," he said. She said nothing. I didn't know you'd started it." His voice changed, very slightly, just at the edges. "I didn't know there was a room." She had converted a small room at the end of the east wing 3 weeks ago. She had not made it elaborate. She wasn't someone who made things elaborate before they needed to be, but she had painted it, chosen a color called soft slate, and put in a second-hand rocking chair that she had found at a market outside the city. She had hung nothing on the walls yet. She had just made the space ready. She had planned to show Adrian after she told him. It was supposed to be the second surprise. "I found the card," he said, so it hadn't been in the jacket. He must have found the copy she'd made before she slipped the original into his pocket. She had copied it because she wasn't sure she'd have the nerve to give it to him and had wanted a backup. "Adrian." She kept her voice very flat. "What do you need from me right now?" "I need to see you." "That's not what I asked, Evelyn. I asked what you need from me." She looked out the car window at the city moving past. "Because I need to know if you're calling because you understand what happened, or if you're calling because you've lost something, and you want me to help you manage the loss." That's not fair. Neither was the police report. Silence. Long enough that she thought he might hang up. "I failed you," he said. "I know I failed you. I've been sitting in this room for 3 hours knowing that I failed you and I cannot." He stopped. "I don't know how to fix it. I don't know if it's fixable." "It's not," she said. "Not right now." "Then tell me what right now is." "Right now I am finding out what actually happened. I am doing that. When I have what I need, I'll be in touch." She paused. "In the meantime, I need you to act as though nothing has changed. Go to your normal meetings. Take your father's calls. Don't tell anyone I've been discharged." A long pause. "What are you doing?" "What you should have started doing 3 days ago." She ended the call. Marcus glanced at her from the driver's seat. "That was harder than you made it sound," he said. "Drive," she said. He drove. Marcus's evidence, combined with what Dara had provided, and what Evelyn had extracted from Petra's account, was beginning to form a picture that was almost complete. Almost. There was still the question of Graham Mercer, where he was, who was protecting him, what exactly he had taken beyond Evelyn's blood. And there was the question of the lighthouse recording that Marcus had flagged in his fourth file, a brief encrypted message intercepted from a burner phone that had pinged a cell tower on the Atlantic coast 40 miles north of the city. The message contained coordinates and a single phrase: "The platform is ready." It had been sent 4 days before the bridge crash, which meant someone had planned the lighthouse before Evelyn had survived the crash. The lighthouse was not a contingency. It was the next step. By 2 in the afternoon, they were parked outside a storage facility on the edge of the financial district where Marcus's contact had secured Graham Mercer's secondary documents, the records he'd kept off the Laurent Estate's official systems. The facility manager met them at the gate, exchanged a look with Marcus that meant money had already changed hands, and led them to a unit on the second level. Inside was a filing cabinet and 2 laptop bags. Marcus's tech contact was already there, a woman named Sol, 20-something, with the particular focused energy of someone who had mainlined caffeine for at least 36 hours. She had both laptops open and running. "The blood records are here," Sol said without looking up. He kept his own copy. The extraction was logged 4 vials on the date of her appointment. 3 returned to the specimen manifest, 1 transferred to a courier. She turned one of the laptops to face Evelyn. The courier logged a delivery to a private clinic in the financial district. The clinic's registered physician is listed as, she squinted slightly at the screen, Dr. Pierce Holman. Marcus went very still beside Evelyn. "You know that name," Evelyn said. "Pierce Holman is Min J. Vale's personal physician." The room was quiet for a moment. "The blood went to Adrian's father's doctor," Evelyn said. "Yes." "Who then produced a fraudulent paternity report?" "Yes." She looked at the laptop screen for a long time. "Min J. told Adrian the report came from an independent lab," she said. "Yes." Adrian believed him. "Yes." She looked at Marcus. "Does Adrian know his father's physician produced that report?" "I don't know what Adrian knows. Find out." She looked back at the screen. "And find out how long Min J has been in contact with Charles Laurent. Not through normal channels, outside channels. How long have those 2 men been coordinating?" Sol's fingers were already moving across the keyboard. The answer came back in under 30 minutes, sourced from 3 years of flagged financial communications that Sol had cross-referenced against travel records, encrypted messaging platform metadata, and 1 extraordinarily detailed set of phone billing records that Marcus had acquired from a source Evelyn decided she didn't need the details of. Min J. Vale and Charles Laurent had been in direct communication for 3 years. 1 year before Evelyn met Adrian. The succession document, the one that put Vivian in temporary control of Evelyn's shares, had been drafted during a meeting in Geneva. They had both been there at the same time, under the cover of a legitimate financial conference. Adrian had been in Seoul that week on family business. He had not known his father was in Geneva. He had not known his father was meeting with Charles Laurent. He had not known that the woman he would meet 11 months later at a charity event in Manhattan was already part of a financial arrangement his father had been quietly building for a year. Evelyn sat with this for a very long moment. She was not surprised. The surprise had left her body somewhere around midnight the night before, when she had been lying in the hospital with her hands flat on her own stomach. What remained was something colder and more useful. What remained was clarity. "They arranged us," she said. Marcus didn't answer. "Adrian and I didn't happen. We were arranged." She worked it through out loud, not for Marcus's benefit, but because she needed to hear the logic in sequence. Charles needed me close and controllable. Min J needed access to Laurent assets. A marriage between me and Adrian gave both of them a solution. Adrian's loyalty to his father meant Min J could influence whatever Adrian knew and didn't know about my inheritance. Charles got me inside a household where my movements could be monitored and where my claim to the trust could be managed. She stopped, and when I got pregnant, she said, I became a problem instead of a solution. Sol had stopped typing. The room was very quiet. "How much does Adrian know?" Evelyn asked. "That's the question," Marcus said. "Give me your honest read." He was quiet for a moment. Genuinely quiet, not stalling, she could tell the difference. "I think Adrian knows his father is not a clean man. I think he has always known that. I think he accepted it because he grew up inside it, and because the organization his father built gave him everything he became." A pause. "I don't think he knew about Geneva. I don't think he knew about the succession document. And I'm fairly certain he did not know his father's daughter produced the paternity report. But he believed the report. Yes. Even knowing what it would mean. Yes." She nodded. Not forgiving the fact of it. Just acknowledging it. Filing it in the correct category. He believed it because he wanted to, she said. Because believing it was easier than the alternative. The alternative being that his father arranged his marriage to use his wife. Yes. She stood up. Her body protested a dull, deep ache that she recognized and filed as information rather than complaint. She had been awake for 36 hours. She needed to sleep. She knew she was not going to sleep yet, Marcus. She turned to face him. The lighthouse coordinates. "What's at those coordinates?" an abandoned lighthouse structure on private land. The land is registered to a holding company. Let me guess. Connected to Min Jae's transportation network. He met her eyes. Same company that flew Graham Mercer out of the city. She felt the shape of it, then the full shape, the way it had been constructed. The lighthouse was not a location that had been chosen at random. It was a controlled space, isolated, owned through channels that pointed back toward Min Jae. And the platform, whatever the platform was, had been prepared 4 days before the bridge crash, before they knew whether Evelyn would survive the crash. The lighthouse was the next step regardless. They're going to take me there, she said. Yes, they need me gone, not just discredited gone. Because as long as I'm alive and coherent and able to make a legal claim, the trust is in contention. She worked it out with the same flat, methodical voice she'd been using all day, the one that sat on top of everything else that was in her body. If I disappear at the lighthouse, the trust enters a contested period. Vivian gets temporary control. Charles maintains his access. Min Jae's arrangement with the Laurent assets continues. That's the working theory. It's not a theory. She picked up her folder from the filing cabinet. It's a plan, and someone is going to execute it whether I cooperate or not. She looked at Marcus. So I need to know how they're going to approach me, and I need to know when. He looked at her for a moment, long enough that she thought he was going to tell her something she didn't want to hear. There's something else, he said. There's always something else. Adrian received a message this afternoon from an unknown sender. I intercepted it through his security system. He doesn't know I have access. Marcus pulled his own phone out. The message contained a ledger page, a single page from what appears to be a financial ledger covering transactions from 11 years ago. He handed her the phone. The page documents a payment. The payment is dated 3 weeks after the car accident that killed Adrian's son, his first son, from his previous relationship. The accident was ruled a mechanical failure. She looked at the screen. It wasn't a mechanical failure, she said. Based on this page, no. Who received the payment? A contractor. The contractor's name appears in Min Jae's organizational records as a fixer. Someone used to handle problems that couldn't be addressed through normal channels. She read the amount on the ledger page. She read the date. She read the notation beside the payment, vehicle alteration, completion confirmed. Adrian's first son had been 3 years old. She had known about him. Adrian had told her, once carefully, in the way people tell you things they have learned to carry lightly enough not to collapse under. He had said it simply, I had a son. He died in an accident. I don't talk about it. She had not pushed. She had understood, or thought she understood, the shape of grief that doesn't want to be handled. Now she was holding evidence that the accident was not an accident, that Min Jae Vale had paid to have it arranged, that Adrian's father had killed his first son. She handed the phone back to Marcus. Her hands were completely steady. The message was sent to Adrian by the unknown number, she said. Yes, to make him act, to make him come after the ledger page directly, to put him in motion before he's thought it through. She felt the architecture of it snap into its final shape. They're using the ledger to move Adrian toward the lighthouse, and they're going to put me there so that he has to choose. The room was very still. There's a pendant, Marcus said. Emergency beacon small enough to wear, passive unless activated. I want you to have it. You think I'm going to the lighthouse. I think they're going to take you there. And you think I can't stop it. He met her eyes. I think if you try to stop it before they move, they disappear, regroup, and come at you from a direction we haven't mapped yet. He held out the pendant, a small flat disc on a thin chain, unremarkable. If you let it play out, but you have the beacon, you can reach me. I can reach you. She took the pendant. She put it on without ceremony, without looking at it, just clasped it at the back of her neck and let it settle against her sternum. She thought about Noah's bracelet in her jacket pocket. She thought about the card she was also carrying. Try not to terrify him before breakfast. She thought about Adrian standing in a room somewhere in the city, reading a ledger page that told him what his father was. Finally, after a lifetime of choosing not to look directly at it, she thought about Vivian's hands on the wheel. She thought about 6 hours. When they come, she said quietly, I won't run. Marcus said nothing. But Marcus. She turned to face him fully, and she let him see, for just a moment, the thing she had been keeping below the surface all day, not grief, because grief was not the right word for what lived in her body right now, but something adjacent to it, something with weight and edges. When you pull me out of the water because it is going to be water, it always ends at the water you pull me out fast. Yes, he said, and then we finish this. Yes, he said again. Outside, the city was going gray with the approach of evening, and somewhere across the water, 40 miles up the coast, a wooden platform waited above the Atlantic, and the people who had built it believed with the complete and catastrophic confidence of people who have never been wrong about someone they underestimated, that Evelyn Cross was out of moves. They came for her at 11 that night. She was at Marcus's secondary apartment, a place he kept under a name that wasn't his, on the 14th floor of a building that had enough foot traffic to make one more woman with a bag unremarkable. She had slept for 3 hours in the afternoon, a hard unconscious sleep that left her feeling scraped rather than rested, and she had woken to find Marcus gone and a note on the kitchen counter that said, "Soul has more." Back by 9. He had been back by 9. They had eaten something. She couldn't have said what. She ate because the body required it, and she had learned long ago not to be precious about fuel, and they had gone over Soul's latest findings for 2 hours, the extended financial trail that now connected Minjay's network to 4 separate payments across 3 years. Each one sanitized through the same offshore structure, each one landing in an account that traced back through 2 shells to a management entity she had already seen. Charles's foundation, the 2 men had been splitting costs. She was processing that the very specific quality of being a shared expense between 2 men, who had decided she was a liability, before she even knew either of them when Marcus's phone buzzed, and he looked at it and went very still. She watched his face. "Adrian left the estate 20 minutes ago," he said. "His car is moving north on the coastal road." Someone showed him the coordinates. The unknown number sent a follow-up message 23 minutes ago. Marcus turned the phone to show her. It says she doesn't have much time. She stood up from the table. She had known it was coming. She had accepted that she was going to let it happen. That did not make the moment of it feel any different from what it actually was, the closing of a trap watch that being built, and had chosen not to run from. "My bag," she said. "Evelyn Marcus, my bag." He handed it to her. She checked the pendant at her sternum, still there, flat and warm from her skin. She put her hand over it for just 1 second. Then she picked up her jacket. "When they come in," she said, "I need you out of this building first. I'm not leaving before. If they find you here, they will neutralize you. You can't pull me out of the water if they've neutralized you." She put on the jacket and turned to look at him. "You have the beacon frequency." "Yes. And you have people on the water." "2 boats? Coast side running dark, then go now. Get to the coast and get in position." She held his eyes. "Don't wait for the signal to already be in the water. Be in position before I get there." He picked up his own bag. She could see him working through the objection, the version of him that wanted to stay, to insert himself between her and whatever was coming, the version that believed protection meant proximity. She had watched that version of him lose the argument to the version that actually listened to her. It took about 4 seconds. 14 minutes to the coast road at this hour," he said. "Then you have about 7 minutes before you need to leave." 4, he said. "I want margin." He left in 3. The apartment was very quiet after he went. She stood in the kitchen for a moment. She drank the rest of the water from the glass she'd been holding during their last hour of conversation. She washed the glass and set it in the drying rack because she was apparently the kind of person who washed a glass at 11 o'clock at night when she was waiting to be taken to a lighthouse to be killed, and she found this neither funny nor pathetic. It was simply what her hands wanted to do, and she had learned to let her hands do what they wanted in the gaps between decisions. They knocked at 11:14. Not the aggressive knock of people trying to intimidate, a measured knock, controlled, the knock of professionals who had done this before and knew that volume was less effective than certainty. 3 knocks evenly spaced. She opened the door. There were 2 of them. Large men in dark clothing, faces she didn't recognize, the kind of professional blankness that came with being paid not to have feelings about the work. The one on the left held a phone, showing her face a photo taken from a distance, probably from the parking structure that morning. "Miss Cross," he said, "we need you to come with us." She looked at the phone. She looked at the men. She thought briefly about what Marcus had said. If you try to stop it before they move, they disappear and regroup and come at you from a direction we haven't mapped. "All right," she said. She picked up her bag. She walked out the door. The drive took 41 minutes. She counted. She had nothing else to do with her attention. They had taken her phone. Efficiently and without apology, the moment she got in the car, so she counted. She tracked direction by the turns and the quality of darkness outside the tinted windows and the change in sound when the road surface shifted from city asphalt to coastal highway. 41 minutes north, then a left turn onto something unpaved, then a descent that felt like the road was approaching water. Then the car stopped. Cold air hit her when they opened the door. Salt and wind. The Atlantic at night in late autumn had a particular quality of hostility, not dramatic, just fundamental, the way a place feels when it has no interest in human presence and has never bothered to pretend otherwise. She could see the lighthouse structure by its silhouette against the sky. Old stone, at least a century, the light long dead. Below it, the land fell away to cliffs and black water. They walked her to it. One man in front, one behind. She walked steadily, and she breathed through her nose because the cold was sharp, and her lungs were already registering the difference from the heated car. Inside the base of the lighthouse, someone had rigged work lights, the temporary LED kind used on construction sites, battery-powered, flooding the stone interior with flat white light that made everyone look like evidence. There was equipment she didn't immediately understand. Cables, 2 sets of metal brackets bolted to the stone walls, a mechanism she recognized after a moment as a platform release system. The platforms were above. Through the open top of the lighthouse structure, she could see where the cables ran up through the dark. Vivian was already there. She was standing near the wall with her arms crossed, not restrained, standing as though she had arrived of her own will, which she had. She was wearing a dark coat, her hair pulled back, and she looked at Evelyn with the expression of someone who has rehearsed a difficult conversation so many times that the rehearsal has burned off all the feeling that used to be attached to it. "You don't look surprised," Vivian said. "I'm not." A third person stood near the platform controls, masked not dramatically, just a balaclava, the practical anonymity of someone who did not want to be identified. He held a tablet that was running a live video feed. On the feed, Adrian's car pulling up outside. Evelyn watched the small screen. She watched Adrian get out of the car. She could tell it was him by the way he moved. That particular combination of deliberate and coiled that was so entirely his. He looked at the lighthouse. He looked at the water. He put his phone in his jacket pocket and walked toward the structure. "He came alone?" she said. "We told him to," Vivian said. "We told him that if he brought security, he'd go over the side before he reached the door." Evelyn looked at the platforms above them. "One for each of us," she said. "You're quick. How long have you been planning this?" Vivian's jaw tightened. "Longer than you think." "Since before I came back?" "Since the moment Charles told me he'd found you." Vivian's voice was flat, but there was something underneath the flatness that's not guilt exactly, but pressure. Something that had been compressed for a long time. "Do you know what that call was like?" "He called me from Geneva. He said, 'I've found my daughter.' He said it like it was good news, like I was supposed to be happy." Her arms tightened across her chest. "I had spent 22 years being his daughter. I had spent 22 years managing this family, managing his moods, managing everything he needed managed. And then he found you, and suddenly I was an interim, a placeholder. So you started watching me before I even arrived. I needed to understand what you were. And what was I?" Vivian looked at her for a long moment. A problem that wasn't going to solve itself. Adrian came through the door. He stopped when he saw Evelyn. Just for a second, a full stop. No words. Just the sight of her registering in his face with the particular force of something he had not entirely let himself believe. He had thought she was dead or close to it. He had spent however many hours since the hospital carrying that weight, and now she was standing in a lighthouse at 11:30 at night, and his face did something complicated and quick that she did not let herself respond to. "Evelyn," his voice was rough. "Adrian." He looked at the room. He looked at Vivian. He looked at the man with the tablet. His hands were open at his sides. She recognized that. The deliberate openness of a man who usually had access to weapons and has come without them because he's accepted the terms in order to get inside the room. "What do you want?" Adrian asked. Not to Evelyn, to the room. The masked man held up the tablet. On the screen was a document, a single ledger page. "This is the original," he said. His voice was processed, distorted through a modulator. "The page that documents the payment for your son's accident. The boy you lost 6 years ago." Adrian's stillness changed quality. "There are more pages," the masked man said. "An entire ledger. The transactions go back 15 years. They cover 4 deaths, 2 of which you know about, and 2 of which you don't. The men who ordered those deaths are the men who have been running your organization from 2 steps behind you for your entire career." A pause. "The ledger can be yours. Full documentation, full chain of evidence, everything you need to take them apart legally and permanently." "What's the condition?" Adrian said. The man gestured upward. "Your wife or Vivian." He held up a remote with 2 toggles. "One of them provides you with the complete ledger and leads you to the evidence. The other," he paused, "does not. You have 60 seconds to choose." The world in that room contracted. Evelyn looked at Adrian. She did not beg. She had known what was coming, which was its own particular kind of terrible to stand in the room where the thing you've been walking toward is finally happening, with full knowledge, and feel it arrive anyway. But she did not beg because begging was not a language she spoke, and because it would not have been honest, and because some part of her, the part that had washed a glass at 11 o'clock and counted turns in a dark car, for 41 minutes needed to see this clearly. She needed to see what Adrian chose when he thought she wasn't watching for it. Vivian said, "I know where they keep the full evidence. I've been inside the filing system for months. I can walk you directly to everything." Her voice was steady, practiced. "Evelyn doesn't know any of it. She's been out of this family since the hospital." "It's not true," Evelyn said quietly. "Tell him what you know then." She said nothing, because what she knew was hers, and she was not going to perform it for a room that had been arranged to make her perform. Adrian looked at Evelyn. She looked back at him. She thought, "You know me. Whatever else you have gotten wrong, you know me." He looked at Vivian. He looked at the masked man. "Save Vivian," he said. The lever dropped. The platform above Evelyn released, and she fell not the long theatrical fall she had imagined in some distant mechanical part of her brain during the drive-up, but a short brutal drop before the cable she had not seen caught. And then the wooden boards under her feet swung out, and she was over open air above the Atlantic, and the wind hit her like a physical argument, and the pendant at her sternum was warm, and she pressed it. She pressed it before the platform fully gave way. She pressed it, and then the last board dropped, and she went into the water. The Atlantic in late autumn is not hospitable. It received her without ceremony. Cold that wasn't cold in the way temperature was cold, but cold, in the way that reality sometimes reasserts itself completely, systemically, all at once. Her body reacted before her mind could manage it, muscles contracting, lungs seizing for one terrible second, the full physical panic that the body produces when it enters water this temperature at this speed. She had worn the pendant at her sternum. She pressed it. She had worn boots she could kick off, and she kicked them off now, 6 feet underwater, moving on instinct and training from a lifetime of surviving things that didn't account for her surviving. She came up once for air. She saw the cliffs above her. She saw the lighthouse structure. She went under again to avoid the rocks. The current moved her south. She let it. Was a decent swimmer, not trained, not athletic, but the kind of decent that comes from growing up without safety nets and learning that water either teaches you or finishes you. She had spent a summer at 19 working a fishing boat off the Maine coast for cash when she had nothing else, and the foreman there had been a woman who believed that everyone on the water should know exactly how bad it could get and what to do when it did. She was doing that now. She counted strokes. She kept the cliff line on her left to orient herself. She kept her breathing deliberate and shallow because deep breaths in cold water cost more than they gave. Marcus's boats were running dark. She couldn't see them. She kept swimming. The lights above the cliff moved. She could see the lighthouse work lights from the water. From this angle, they were just a glow, imprecise. She thought about Adrian standing in that room. She thought about his face for the 2 seconds before he spoke. She had looked for something in his face, and she had found something, but she hadn't been able to read it fast enough before the moment ended and the lever moved. She thought he believed Vivian, she thought, or he believed the ledger was real, and the ledger mattered more. Both things were true, and neither of them was the point right now. She felt the boat before she heard it a change in the current, the displacement of something large moving nearby in the dark. Then a light, low and directed, sweeping across the water 30 feet to her left. She raised one arm. The light found her. What followed was not graceful. It was hands and rope and the particular indignity of being pulled from cold water by people trying to be efficient while also trying not to hurt her. And she came over the side of the inflatable raft in stages and lay on the rubber hull while someone put a thermal blanket over her, and someone else said her name twice in a voice that was trying not to sound as relieved as it was. "Marcus, I'm here," she said. Her voice came out wrecked cold and waterlogged and not very loud. "I'm here. Don't talk. Tell me you have someone watching the lighthouse." "Don't talk, Marcus." "Yes," he said, "I have someone watching the lighthouse." She closed her eyes. She lay still in the thermal blanket on the rubber hull while the boat moved south, and the Atlantic made its feelings about all of this perfectly clear through the hull beneath her, and she breathed. She was alive. Adrian did not know she was alive. And somewhere above them, on a cliff with a dead lighthouse and work lights running on battery power, Vivian Laurent was making promises she intended to keep and handing Adrian Vale exactly what he had chosen over his wife. By the time Marcus's team reached the secondary dock, a private slip 30 minutes south, owned by a name that didn't trace back to anything connected to either family, Evelyn had stopped shaking. Not because she was warm. She was not warm. But the shaking had run its course the way things do when the Bada finishes its most immediate argument and accepts that it has been overruled. They got her into a building, a room, a heater that ran on propane and produced the particular smell of emergency heat. Someone brought dry clothes, practical things, not her size exactly but close enough, and she changed without being asked to, behind a partition, moving carefully, because her muscles had been through several things tonight and were communicating their displeasure in specific terms. She came out and sat down at the table where Marcus was already working. His laptop was open. Sol was on the other end of a video call, her face small in the corner of the screen, her hair in the same configuration as 8 hours ago, which suggested she had not moved in 8 hours. Lighthouse, Evelyn said. Adrian left 40 minutes ago, Marcus said. Vivian went with him. The 2 men who brought you in are unaffiliated contractors. We have names. They'll be picked up before morning. The masked man. A pause. Gone, Marcus said. Gone how? Gone before we had eyes on the exit. He knew where our positions were. Marcus looked at her, which means someone told him. She absorbed this. Someone in your team, she said. Or someone who accessed my team's positioning. The beacon signal is encrypted, but he stopped. The frequency was set up through Sol's system. Sol's face on the screen was very still. I didn't. I'm not saying you, Marcus said. I'm saying someone accessed the system that Sol uses, which is different. Who has access to that system? Evelyn asked. Sol opened her mouth. Closed it, technically? 3 people. Me, Marcus, and the person who originally built the encryption layer. A pause. That's a man named Carver. He's been Marcus's tech infrastructure since. She stopped. Since when? Evelyn said. Since 3 years ago, Sol said quietly. 3 years. The same timeline as Minjay and Charles's Geneva meeting. Evelyn looked at Marcus. His face had gone very controlled in the way faces go when someone is processing something that is both professionally devastating and personally expensive. Carver was not just an infrastructure contact. She understood this without being told. The way Marcus had gone still told her everything about what Carver had been. He knew the beacon frequency, Evelyn said. He knew your boat positions. He gave the masked man an exit window. Yes, Marcus's voice was flat, which means whoever orchestrated tonight knew about the beacon before I activated it. Yes, they let you pull me out. Silence. They let you pull me out, she said again, working it through, because a dead body creates a legal process that takes months. A missing person, a woman who fell from a lighthouse platform into the Atlantic and was never recovered, that creates a presumption. That moves faster. She felt the shape of it settle into place. They need me gone but not provably dead, because a death triggers an estate investigation. A disappearance triggers the succession clause. Marcus was looking at her with the expression of someone who has realized they've been a step behind for longer than they understood. The succession document has a specific timeline, she said. How long from declaration of disappearance to temporary transfer of voting shares? Sol's fingers moved. 90 days. Under the document's terms, if the primary heir is declared missing for 90 days without proof of death or legal capacity, the temporary transfer activates. 90 days. She sat with that. They don't need me dead. They need me gone for 90 days. She looked at the thermal blanket still draped over her shoulders. And they've arranged it so the only person who knows I'm alive is sitting in this room. Marcus said nothing. If I surface, she said, if I walk into a lawyer's office or a courthouse or anywhere that creates a record, what stops them from accelerating? What stops Vivian from having an accident of her own before I can make the legal claim? Nothing, Marcus said. Without the ledger. Ledger is with Adrian. She pressed 2 fingers against her sternum. Over the place where the pendant had been, it was gone now. Somewhere in the Atlantic, which meant the beacon was gone too. And Adrian thinks I'm dead. He'll find out you're not. How? Who tells him? Marcus was quiet. If I contact Adrian, I tip the whole table before we have the evidence secured. If I don't contact Adrian, Vivian has 90 days to cement her position and disappear anything that can be traced. She looked at the ceiling, then back down. And if Carver has been inside your system for 3 years, we don't know what else he's compromised. We don't know what they already know about what we found today, the document Sol said. The copies from Graham's storage unit. If Carver had access to the system I was running, could he have seen what you pulled? Evelyn asked. Sol looked sick. It's possible. Did you store copies anywhere connected to that system? She stopped. The preliminary financial records. I backed them up through the standard encrypted drive, which runs through Carver's infrastructure. The room was quiet. So they know what we found, Evelyn said. They know about the succession document. They know about the Geneva meeting. They know about the offshore accounts. She put her hands flat on the table, and they let us find it. They let us build the case, and then they let it go into a system they control. And now we have copies of documents that they can challenge the provenance of because they can prove the chain of custody runs through a compromised source. Everything she had spent 2 days building. Every piece of evidence that Dara and Sol and Marcus had pulled together. All of it potentially tainted now. All of it running through a channel that the other side controlled. All of it potentially inadmissible or at minimum challengeable in a way that would require months to untangle. She looked at her hands on the table. She thought about the nursery. Soft slate walls, a second-hand rocking chair. Nothing on the walls yet. She thought about Noah's bracelet in her jacket pocket, which was currently somewhere in the Atlantic. She thought about the card, also gone. The card she had been carrying since she took it from Adrian's jacket that morning, the one in her own handwriting, try not to terrify him before breakfast. Both things gone now, into the same water she had just come out of. She pressed both hands flat against the table and held them there and stayed inside the moment instead of trying to move through it before she was ready, because moving too fast right now, making the next decision, before she had actually absorbed the dimensions of the current position that was the kind of error that could not be corrected. They've taken everything, she said. Not as a complaint, as inventory. The evidence chain is compromised. My legal position requires me to surface, which tips them off before I'm ready. My identity as a living person is currently known to 3 people in this room, and a man named Carver who is working for the people trying to erase me. She breathed. The only uncompromised piece of evidence is the original ledger, which is in Adrian's hands. Adrian, who believes I'm dead. Adrian, who chose the ledger over me 6 hours ago. She looked up at Marcus. I need a new name, she said. He looked at her, not a cover, a working identity. Papers, credit history, medical records clean. Nothing that connects to anything Carver touched. She held Marcus's eyes, and she let him see exactly where she was right now, inside this decision, making it clearly and without drama. And I need you to understand that for the next period, however long it takes to rebuild the evidence chain through clean sources, Evelyn Cross is gone. Evelyn. She went into the water. They think they won. She pushed her chair back from the table. Let them think that for exactly as long as I need them to. She stood up slowly, because her body had opinions about sudden movement that she respected. While they're celebrating, I'm going to take apart every piece of what they built, and I'm going to do it from inside a name they've never heard of, through sources they've never compromised. And by the time I walk back into that family, it will be with something they cannot challenge, and cannot contain, and cannot make disappear. She looked at Sol. Can you build a clean identity? Nothing connected to any system Carver touched. Nodded slowly. It'll take 48 hours. You have 36. She turned toward the small window that faced the water. Black out there. Completely black, the Atlantic at this hour, swallowing its own surface. Somewhere under that water was a pendant and a bracelet, and a card in her own handwriting, and everything she had been carrying when she went in. She turned away from the window. What's my name? She asked Marcus. He was quiet for a moment. Then that's your call. She thought for exactly 3 seconds. Ava, she said. Ava Reed. An Evelyn Cross who had survived being erased at 6 years old, who had built herself from nothing twice already, who had gone into the Atlantic tonight with nothing but a beacon and a decision, stepped back from the edge of everything she had been, and began. In the cold, propane-heated air of a boathouse 30 minutes from the lighthouse, where they had tried to finish her, the slow and deliberate process of becoming someone they had never planned for. 4 days passed. Ava Reed did not rush. Evelyn Cross had moved fast on instinct and urgencies, and the particular momentum of someone who believed that speed was the same as control. Ava Reed understood that speed was how you made mistakes that couldn't be unmade, and she had already paid the price for other people's mistakes, and she was not interested in adding her own to the account. Marcus set her up in a rented room above a hardware store in a coastal town 40 minutes from the city. Small room, one window facing the water, a bed and a table and a bathroom, with a shower head that ran either cold or scalding, with nothing in between. She spent the first day sleeping in 4-hour intervals and eating whatever Marcus left outside the door and doing nothing else, because her body had made it clear that the alternative was not a negotiation it was willing to enter. The second day she started moving again. Not fast. Carefully. Deliberately. The way you move when you're relearning which muscles are available and which ones are filing formal complaints. Sol delivered the Ava Reed identity on schedule 34 hours, 2 under the target, which told Evelyn something about Sol that she filed away for later. The documents were clean. The credit history was thin but coherent. A woman who had lived quietly in 3 states over 8 years, worked administrative jobs, had a checking account with a balance that suggested someone careful with money, but not prosperous. The kind of woman who didn't register in rooms. Exactly what she needed. On the third day, Marcus came in and sat across from her at the small table and put a folder down. Vivian moved on the Laurent Council, he said. She had expected this. How fast? She called an emergency session 2 days after the lighthouse. She told the council that you had suffered a breakdown following the loss of the pregnancy, that you had made threats against the family, and that your disappearance represented a voluntary abandonment of your inheritance rights. He opened the folder. She presented documentation. What kind of documentation? Signed statements from 2 Laurent staff members. A letter purportedly from Dr. Anaya Singh noting concerns about your mental state, and a preliminary succession filing citing the 90-day clause. Evelyn picked up the folder. She read through it steadily, not fast, letting each page settle before she moved to the next. The Singh's letter was forged. She could see it immediately. The letter used the doctor's correct credentials and institutional address, but the phrasing was wrong. Slightly formal in a way, Doctor. Singh never was. And the signature had a pressure irregularity that someone who had seen Singh's actual handwriting would catch. Evelyn sent it on 4 appointment summaries. The staff statement she read twice. One of them was Petra. She set that page down and breathed through her nose for a moment. Then she picked it back up and kept reading. Because Petra's statement was careful. It noted things that were factually true, but arranged them to suggest a narrative that wasn't. And Evelyn recognized the specific craft of someone who had been told exactly what to write and had written as much of the truth as they could manage within those instructions while still protecting themselves. Petra was scared. That was different from Petra being a traitor, and Evelyn held those 2 things separately, because conflating them would make her less effective. The council session, she said. What did they decide? Tabled pending a 30-day review period. The senior counsel, a man named Briggs, he's been with the Laurent organization. For 15 years, he pushed back on the timeline. Said the 90-day clause required clearer evidence of abandonment before the filing could proceed. Briggs. She had met him once at a Laurent board dinner. A dry man, thorough, the kind of lawyer who slowed things down not because he cared about outcomes, but because he cared about process. She had found him irritating at the time. She found him useful now. He bought us 30 days, effectively. What's Adrian doing? Marcus's expression shifted. Just slightly, the quality of his stillness changed, which was how she read him now, through what moved and what didn't. Tell me, she said. Adrian has been meeting with his father's attorney. She put the folder down, Min Jae's attorney. Yes, not federal counsel. Not his own independent attorney. No. She stood up. She crossed to the window and looked at the water. 4 days ago, she had gone into that water and come out the other side of something, and she had believed she had let herself believe, which was its own kind of error, that Adrian's presence at the lighthouse meant he had been moving toward her. That choosing wrong in the moment was different from choosing wrong in everything that followed. He's protecting the organization, she said. That's one reading. It's the other reading. Marcus was quiet for a moment. That he doesn't know what to do, and his father's attorney is the only lawyer he trusts, and he's trying to understand the ledger's implications before he makes any public move. The ledger. She turned from the window. Has he done anything with it? Not yet. It hasn't surfaced publicly. It hasn't been submitted to any authority. A pause. He's holding it. He's holding evidence of his father murdering his son. Yes. She put her hand against the window frame. The wood was cold from the wall, and the cold was grounding, in the way that physical sensation was grounding, when everything else was too abstract to hold on to. He's going to bury it, she said. I don't know that. He's sitting in his father's attorney's office with a ledger that proves Min Jae ordered the death of a 3-year-old child. She took her hand off the window frame, and he's holding it. After 4 days, he's still holding it. What does holding it tell you? Marcus didn't answer, because there was no answer that was also kind. And Marcus had learned, in 4 days of Ava Reed, that she didn't need things to be kind. She needed them to be accurate. He's going to make a deal, she said. He's going to use the ledger as leverage against his father for something organizational control, financial restructuring, some kind of internal settlement, and the ledger is going to disappear into that deal, and Min-jae is going to pay a price that he chooses, and nothing is going to reach a courtroom. She picked up her jacket from the chair. We need the evidence out of Carver's reach, she said. Now. Not when it's ready. Now, we don't have a clean chain yet. Then we build it in the field. She was already moving toward the door. Get Sol on the phone, and get me into the Laurent headquarters by tonight. Marcus stood up. Evelyn Ava, she said, not stopping. My name is Ava Reed, and I need to get into that building before Adrian makes a decision that buries the last 4 months of work under a private settlement with his father. She looked at him over her shoulder. Are you coming or not? He was already reaching for his keys. The plan they built in Marcus's car over the 40 minutes back toward the city was not elegant. Elegant plans required time and resources she didn't have. What she had instead was a specific knowledge of the Laurent headquarters, building 2 years of attending board meetings, walking those corridors, learning which security cameras had blind angles, and which keypads used 6-digit codes that hadn't been rotated since the system was installed because Charles trusted routine over security. What she also had was a face that Vivian believed was at the bottom of the Atlantic. That was the only advantage she had, and she was going to use it completely. Sol joined them by phone as Marcus drove. She had the Laurent headquarters security layout on her screen, not through Carver's infrastructure, through a completely separate system she had built on an air-gapped device she'd been developing for 3 months as a secondary redundancy, and had never connected to anything Carver touched. The East Corridor keypad is the same code? Evelyn asked. Last system audit was 14 months ago, Sol said. No rotation noted. The wall safe in Vivian's office. You have the model from the building permits? Sargent and Greenleaf, 2020 model. Combination lock, 6-digit. No electronic interface, no network connection, purely mechanical. A pause. You'll need visual access to read the dial. I'll have it. Marcus glanced at her. How? I watched her open it. She kept her eyes on the road ahead. 7 weeks ago, when she was pulling the succession document to show Charles something before a council meeting. I was standing near the window, and I wasn't supposed to be looking, but I was. 6 digits, 2 rotations left, 3 right, 1 left. I don't have all 6 numbers, but I have the stop points. How many combinations does that leave? Manageable. If I have enough time. You won't have enough time if anyone recognizes you. Then I won't let anyone recognize me. She went in as a medical compliance officer. Sol had printed credentials on the Clean Device badge, a referral letter from a regulatory body the Laurent organization's medical consultant contracted with, a clipboard with what looked like inspection documentation. The kind of paperwork that made reception desks wave you through, because the alternative was a conversation with someone who had official capacity and a clipboard. She kept her hair different down and forward, covering more of her face than she usually wore it, and she had changed her posture, which was something she had discovered in her years of surviving rooms that didn't want her there. Posture was more identifiable than a face. People recognized how you held your body before they registered your features. She walked differently as Ava Reed, slightly forward in the shoulders, head angled down 2 degrees, the walk of someone who was thinking about the next task rather than the current room. The reception desk waved her through. The East Corridor keypad accepted the code. She was inside the Laurent organization's executive wing at 8:47 in the evening, which was late enough that the executive floor was largely empty, but not so late that a compliance officer running an after-hours inspection would be remarkable. She moved quickly once she was past the main desk. Not running movement drew attention, but with the specific purposeful stride of someone who knew exactly where they were going and believed they had every right to be going there. Vivian's office was at the end of the East Corridor. The light was on. She stopped. She had not accounted for Vivian being here this late. She had calculated that Vivian would be at the Laurent estate that was where she had been the previous 2 evenings. According to the observation Marcus had maintained, tonight was supposed to be the same. She assessed from the corridor. The door was not entirely closed. It sat perhaps 2 inches open, which meant she could hear if she stood close enough. She stood close enough. The council session is in 3 days, Vivian was saying. Her voice was level, the voice she used for business, stripped of the emotional register she allowed herself in private moments. Briggs is going to push back again. I need something that makes the pushback irrelevant. A man's voice answered. She recognized it immediately. Charles Laurent. The psychiatric evaluation, Charles said. The psychiatrist I retained will submit the report before the session. Briggs will want to verify the credentials. The credentials are impeccable. The report will indicate a pattern of delusional behavior extending. Charles paused. At minimum 8 months prior to her death. They were building a post-mortem psychiatric history. They were creating a medical record that documented Evelyn Cross as mentally unfit for a period that predated the lighthouse, which meant that even if her body surfaced, even if the lighthouse circumstances were ever investigated, they would have documentation suggesting she had been unreliable and irrational before any of it happened. They were not just erasing her inheritance. They were erasing her credibility retroactively. She pressed her back against the wall and breathed. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Very quiet. The blood records from the specimen lab, Vivian said. Graham's copies, destroyed, Charles said. Soule's financial documents. Carver confirmed the copies went through his infrastructure. The chain is compromised. It won't hold in any proceeding. And the ledger? A pause, longer than the others. Adrian is being managed, Charles said. That's not an answer. It's the answer you have. Charles's voice carried the particular irritation of a man who expected his statements to function as conclusions. Min-jae is handling his son. The ledger will not surface publicly. And if Adrian decides to surface it himself? Silence. Then Min-jae handles that too, Charles said. She heard that. She heard what it meant. If Adrian moved against the arrangement, Min-jae would handle his own son the way he had handled a 3-year-old child in a car 6 years ago. She pushed off the wall. She had not planned for this. She had come for the safe. She had come for the ledger page. She had watched Vivian file there 7 weeks ago. But the ledger page was secondary now, because the primary variable had just changed, and the primary variable was Adrian walking into a conversation with his father's attorney, carrying evidence that his father was willing to kill him to contain. She pushed the office door open. Vivian spun around. Charles on the phone went very still. Evelyn walked in. The silence lasted exactly 2 seconds. The 2 seconds it took for both of their faces to process what they were seeing, to run the information through the part of the brain that categorizes things as impossible, and then has to recategorize when the impossible is standing in the room in a medical compliance badge, and Ava Reed's borrowed posture. Then Vivian said, "That's not—" "Put the phone down, Charles," Evelyn said. His voice came through the phone, tinny and distant. "Vivian, what's happening?" "She's here," Vivian said. The phone went silent in a different way, the silence of someone who has received information they are now processing with the full cold attention of a man who has spent 50 years managing threats. Evelyn crossed to the desk. She did not run. She did not hesitate. She walked at the 12 feet between the door and the desk, with the specific quality of someone who has made a decision they are not reconsidering. She took the phone from Vivian's hand. Vivian let her take it not from compliance, from shock, the few seconds of shock that precede the body catching up to the brain's emergency signals. "Charles," she said into the phone, his breathing on the other end, controlled. Like Adrian's breathing, the apple and the tree. "I need you to listen carefully," she said. In the next 20 minutes, the Laurent headquarters security system is going to receive a visit from federal investigators. They have a warrant for financial records covering the past 4 years. The warrant was filed 2 hours ago through a source that has no connection to anyone in this room, or to any infrastructure that Carver touched. She paused. The evidence they're collecting doesn't require my testimony, and it doesn't require your cooperation. It's already been submitted. What happens in this room in the next 20 minutes only affects whether you are here when they arrive. Silence from Charles. Then you're bluffing. "I'm standing in your daughter's office," she said, "while you believed I was dead. How's the bluff theory working for you?" She handed the phone back to Vivian and turned to the safe. Vivian grabbed her arm. Not gently, a hard grip, fingers digging in with the strength of someone who has spent 4 days believing she had won and has just discovered she has not. And the emotion driving that grip was something rawer than strategy. It was fear wearing the face of fury. "You don't walk in here?" Vivian started. "Let go of my arm." Evelyn did not raise her voice. "You're dead. You were supposed to." "Let go of my arm, Vivian." Vivian did not let go. What happened next was not graceful, and it was not planned, and it was entirely instinct. Evelyn turned into the grip instead of pulling against it, used the leverage of the turn to break the hold at the weakest point of Vivian's grip, and stepped back, with 2 feet of distance between them and her arm free. Her shoulder screamed. The muscles from 4 nights ago had opinions about sudden rotation that were loud and specific. She absorbed those opinions and filed them. Vivian was breathing hard. Her composure had fractured the way composure fractures when it's been maintained by force. For too long it didn't shatter dramatically. It just cracked at the edges and showed what had been underneath it the whole time. What was underneath it was a woman who was exhausted and frightened and had made a series of choices she could not unmake and knew it. "You told me you were a threat," Vivian said. Her voice had changed. Not soft, just stripped of the business register, down to something more fundamental. "Charles, from the beginning he sees that you would come back and you would take everything, and I would have nothing. So you helped steal my blood and engineer a car crash." Evelyn's voice was even. Not cold exactly, level. "And you killed my son." "The crash wasn't supposed to." Vivian stopped. Finish that sentence. "The crash wasn't supposed to kill the baby. It was supposed to. It was meant to be a minor accident. A scare. Something that would end the pregnancy without." She stopped again. "Without what?" "Without being traceable to me." The room held that. Evelyn turned to the safe. Her hands were steady. She did not understand why her hands were steady. She felt everything else that was in her body right now, the full weight of what Vivian had just confirmed. And it was not nothing. It was enormous. It sat on her chest like physical pressure. But her hands were steady the way they had always been steady when she needed them to be, which was a kind of reliability she had stopped questioning and started accepting as simply the version of herself that came out when everything else was on fire. She began working the combination, left, right, the click of the mechanism under her fingertips. "You're going to prison," Evelyn said while she worked. "Not as a threat, as information. Not because I want that specifically. Because what you did to Noah has a legal name, and the evidence of it is going to be in federal hands within the hour. That happened before I walked in here, a click. Another rotation. What happens to you after that is up to what you do in the next 10 minutes. Vivian was very still behind her. "The statement you gave to the Laurent Council," Evelyn said. "The one claiming I was mentally unstable and made threats. You're going to recant it. In writing tonight before those investigators arrive." Another click. She felt the mechanism shift. "And you're going to tell them about Petra's statement and how it was obtained. If you don't do that, you are the last person standing with operational knowledge of the lighthouse, and no one else to share the weight with. Charles is going to protect Charles. Min-jae is going to protect Min-jae." She rotated the final sequence. "Right now you have something they don't have the specific details of what was planned and who executed what part of it. That has legal value. That is the only thing that has legal value." She heard the mechanism release. "You are 29 seconds from having no leverage at all." The safe opened. Inside, financial documents, 2 USB drives, a folded legal agreement, and the ledger page. The single page, from the financial record, documenting the payment for a vehicle alteration. The death of a child on a date Adrian remembered as the worst day of his life, and carried without knowing its weight had been deliberately placed on him. She took the ledger page. She took the 2 USB drives, because she didn't know what was on them, and she was not leaving anything inside a safe she had just opened. She turned around. Vivian was sitting in the desk chair. She had sat down at some point during the last 2 minutes, which was less like defeat and more like the way a person sits when they have finally run out of the energy that had been holding them upright. "He told me from the beginning you were the threat," Vivian said again. Quieter this time. "I know, I believed him. I know. Vivian looked at her hands in her lap. "I was so afraid of being replaced that I didn't ask myself what I was becoming instead." Evelyn looked at her. She did not find it in herself to offer comfort, because comfort required a generosity she did not currently have available, and she was not going to perform generosity for the woman who had driven a car off a bridge with her inside it. But she found something more accurate than comfort. "Write the recantation," she said. "Right now, on Laurent letterhead dated tonight, signed." Vivian looked up. "If you do it before they arrive, it matters differently than if they have to extract it," Evelyn said. "That's the only thing I have to offer you. Use it or don't." She pulled her phone, the clean phone, the Ava Reed phone, and sent Marcus a single message, "Federal team. Now." Then she stood in the middle of Vivian Laurent's office with a ledger page and 2 USB drives and a medical compliance badge that had been printed 36 hours ago by a woman on an air-gap device, and she waited. Vivian opened a desk drawer. She pulled out Laurent letterhead. She picked up a pen. She began to write. The federal investigators arrived at 9:17. There were 4 of them, led by a woman named Agent Diane Marsh, compact, efficient, with the particular quality of organized patience that long federal careers produced in people who had originally been impatient. She and Evelyn had spoken twice by phone over the preceding 48 hours. Their relationship was not warm. It was professional in the specific way that relationships are professional when both parties understand exactly what the other person needs and have decided to exchange it for what they need in return. Evelyn had given Marsh the offshore financial records the ones Soul had rebuilt through the clean device, the ones with a provenance chain that did not touch Carver anywhere in its history. Marsh had given Evelyn a warrant timeline that allowed a 40-minute window inside the Laurent building before official arrival. The 40 minutes was now expired. Marsh looked at the room. She looked at Vivian with the letter in front of her. She looked at Evelyn. "Miss Cross," she said, "Agent Marsh. You look like someone who's been in the water recently." "I'm fine. The warrant covers financial records, communication logs, and any physical documentation relating to the offshore accounts we identified." Marsh looked at the open safe. That includes the contents of any on-site storage. Evelyn held out the ledger page and the 2 USB drives. Marsh took them. She looked at the ledger page for a long moment. "This is what I think it is," she said. "Yes. This implicates Min-Jae Vale directly." "Yes." Marsh looked up. "Miss Cross, Min-Jae Vale is currently in a meeting with his attorney and Adrian Vale at the Meridian Hotel 6 blocks from here." Evelyn felt her chest tighten. "How long have they been there?" 2 hours. Marsh held her eyes. "We have reason to believe the meeting concerns a private agreement regarding certain financial records that Mr. Adrian Vale has been holding." "The original, yes." A pause. "If that agreement is completed before we can establish cause for intervention, the original ledger disappears into a private settlement." Evelyn already had her jacket on, and Min-Jae walks away with a controlled penalty instead of a federal charge. "That is the concern, yes." "Can you stop the meeting?" "Not without cause that requires." Marsh paused deliberately. "A witness, someone who can provide first-hand testimony connecting Min-Jae Vale to the events at the lighthouse and to the financial records we've just collected." She looked at Evelyn with the expression of someone who has set up a sentence and is waiting for the other person to understand where it ends. The room was very quiet. Evelyn understood exactly where the sentence ended. She looked at Marsh. She looked at Vivian, still sitting at the desk with the recantation letter in front of her, pen still in hand. She looked at the open safe and the empty space where the documents had been. 4 days ago, she had gone into the Atlantic and decided to disappear long enough to rebuild everything from a clean position. The clean position was not ready. The evidence chain was solid, but it was new, and it needed time to be tested and verified and processed through legitimate channels. And Evelyn knew enough about legal proceedings from 2 years inside this family to understand that showing up as a witness before the evidence was processed created vulnerabilities she could not fully calculate from inside this room. She also knew that Adrian was 6 blocks away, sitting across from his father, holding a ledger that documented the murder of his first son, about to make a deal that would bury it. She thought about the nursery, soft slate, a second-hand rocking chair. Nothing on the walls yet. She thought about Adrian's face in the lighthouse, that full stop when he saw her. The 2 seconds before he made his calculation. What had been in his face in those 2 seconds before the calculation finished? She thought, "I looked for something and I found something. I just didn't read it fast enough." She picked up the clean phone. She called Marcus. "I need you at the Meridian Hotel," she said. "Now. Bring whatever you have on Carver everything. Names, dates, the proof of access. All of it. Why? Because I'm about to walk into a room with Min-Jae Vale, and I need something in Adrian's hands that his father can't take away from him." She was already moving toward the door. "The ledger is in there, the original. If Min-Jae signs whatever he's offering, it goes into private arbitration and it disappears." "Evelyn Ava," she said. Then she stopped. She stood in the doorway of Vivian's office, with federal investigators behind her, and a medical compliance badge she was about to take off, and the full weight of the decision she was making, settling onto her shoulders where it would stay until whatever happened at the Meridian Hotel resolved itself one way or the other. "No," she said, "not anymore." She pulled the badge off. She handed it to Marcus's contact, who had appeared in the corridor, a young man she didn't know, who took it without comment. She turned back to Marsh. "I'll testify," she said. "Right now. Whatever form you need it in, whatever statement, whatever first-hand account, I'll give it. But I need to be in that hotel in the next 10 minutes. Marsh looked at her for a long moment. "Miss Cross," she said, "you understand that once you walk into that room, the private nature of your survival ends. Yes, they will know you're alive. Yes, Min J. Vale, Charles Laurent. Everyone who believed you were gone will know in the next 20 minutes. I know. Marsh studied her face. Whatever she saw there apparently satisfied some internal calculation, because she nodded once, a small, precise nod, the kind that didn't waste motion. My team goes in first, Marsh said. You wait until I signal. Understood. And Marsh paused. The ledger page you handed me, combined with the financial records Sol provided, if Adrian Vale cooperates as a witness rather than as a subject, the case against his father is significantly stronger. He'll cooperate, Evelyn said. She said it with more certainty than she entirely felt. Then she walked out of the Laurent executive wing into the corridor, past the east keypad, through the reception area, where the desk attendant looked up and then looked back down, because the woman walking through was walking like someone who had places to be and reasons for all of them, and out the front door into the cold night air of the city. Marcus's car was already at the curb. She got in. Meridian Hotel, she said. He drove. 6 blocks passed in 3 minutes. The city at 9 in the evening had its own rhythm, the particular density of people and light and sound that a city produces when the day crowd is gone and the night crowd has not yet peaked, that gap hour, when the streets belong to no one in particular. She looked at her hands in her lap during those 3 minutes. She thought about what she was about to do. She was about to walk into a hotel meeting room and show Min J. Vale that she was alive, and that she had been alive for 4 days, during which she had been rebuilding the evidence his partner Carver had compromised. She was about to show Adrian that the woman he had chosen the ledger over was standing in front of him and had still, despite everything, made sure the ledger survived. She was about to give federal investigators the live testimony they needed to move from a warrant to an arrest. And she was about to do all of this in a room, with a man who had already killed 2 children to protect his position, and would not require much additional provocation to decide that one more was acceptable. Marcus pulled up to the Meridian. Marsh's vehicles were already there, 3 of them, positioned with the specific discretion of federal teams that wanted to be present before being visible. Evelyn opened the car door. Marcus put his hand on her arm, not grabbing, just a touch, brief, at the inside of her wrist, where her pulse was doing something that probably confirmed everything his instincts were telling him. When it's over, he said. She looked at him. When it's over, he said again. Just that. She put her hand over his for 1 second. Then she got out of the car and walked into the Meridian Hotel and crossed the lobby toward the elevator bank and pressed the button for the 7th floor where the private meeting suites were, and the elevator doors closed in front of her, and she watched her own face in the mirrored surface, not Ava Reed's careful angles and borrowed posture, but her own face, Evelyn Cross, scarred along the jaw from the lighthouse fall, the left side of her neck still bruised at the edge of the collar, and the elevator rose and she breathed. And when the doors opened, she stepped out into the 7th floor corridor where Marsh was, already waiting with 2 agents flanking a closed door. Marsh looked at her, gave the nod. Evelyn Cross put her hand on the door handle. She opened the door. The meeting suite was a standard corporate room dressed up to look like something more, a long table, 8 chairs, a sideboard with water and glasses nobody had touched, windows facing the city that made the lights outside look like something organized and intentional. 3 men sat at the table, Min J. Vale on the far side, his attorney beside him with a document open in front of them, and Adrian at the near end, with the ledger in a folder on the table, and his hands flat on either side of it, and an expression that told her he had been sitting in this room for 2 hours doing the hardest kind of accounting. There was the kind where every number is a person. She watched all 3 faces register her arrival in sequence. The attorney first, a professional startle, the reflexive recoil of someone encountering an unexpected variable. Min J. second, and his face did something she had not expected, which was that it went very still, in a way that was not surprise exactly. It was recognition. It was the face of a man who has run a calculation that said the variable was eliminated, and who is now looking at the variable standing in a doorway, in the clothes she has been wearing for 4 days, with a scar along her jaw that is still new enough to be dark at the edges, and who is updating his calculation in real time, with the specific cold efficiency of someone who has always survived by updating faster than other people. Adrian last. He stood up. He stood up before he said anything. Before he seemed to make a decision to stand, his body responded to her presence before his mind caught up to it, and she noted this the way she noted everything now, accurately, and without letting it move her off the task. Evelyn, he said. Not a question. Just her name, said with the quality of something being confirmed that he had been afraid to confirm. Agent Marsh came in behind her, followed by the two agents who had been in the corridor. Mr. Vale, Marsh said, addressing Min Jae. I'm Agent Diane Marsh, Federal Financial Crimes Division. We have a warrant for your arrest relating to conspiracy, financial fraud, and charges connected to the falsification of evidence in a civil inheritance proceeding. She placed a copy of the warrant on the table. Additionally, we are opening a formal investigation into the death of. She checked her document. James Connor Vale, aged 7 years ago. New evidence has emerged suggesting the vehicle accident that caused his death was arranged. The room was completely silent. Min Jae did not look at the warrant. He looked at Evelyn. She held his gaze. He was 64 years old, and he had the eyes of a man who had never once in his adult life encountered a problem he couldn't price correctly and pay someone to manage. He looked at her the way you look at a structural failure, not with fear, with calculation, trying to identify where exactly the load-bearing element had given way. You died, he said. I didn't, she said. The Atlantic is cold but manageable. She walked to the table. She stood across from him, with the full length of the table between them, and she put her hands on the surface and leaned slightly forward. Not aggressive, present. Making herself present in a room that had been arranged to contain things that were supposed to stay contained. I had help. Min Jae looked at his attorney. His attorney was already halfway through a standard legal refusal, something about jurisdiction and process, and speaking to the investigators separately when Marsh put up one hand. The warrant supersedes the meeting, Marsh said. The private agreement on the table is not legally binding in the context of an active federal investigation. Anything signed in this room tonight has no standing. The attorney stopped talking. Marsh's two agents moved to flank Min Jae. Efficient, practiced, no theatrics, Min Jae stood. He straightened his jacket. He was the kind of man who would straighten his jacket in the moment of his arrest, because presentation was the last thing he surrendered, and he would not surrender it here. He looked across the table at Adrian. You brought this here, he said. Adrian's jaw was tight. I didn't know she was. You kept the ledger. You sat in this room. Min Jae's voice was precise and clean and entirely without heat. You had the choice to contain this, and you chose to sit in a hotel room for 2 hours, making a decision you'd already made. You killed my son, Adrian said. The 3 words sat in the room like something physical. Min Jae looked at his son with an expression that was the most honest thing Evelyn had ever seen on his face, not remorse, not denial. Just the bare acknowledgement of a man who has done the thing he is accused of and has long since resolved his accounting with it privately. I built everything you have, Min Jae said. Including a grave, Adrian said. Marsh's agents moved. Min Jae went with them, not resisting, because Min Jae Vale was not a man who resisted arrest in hotel meeting rooms. He resisted through attorneys and delays and financial instruments, and the 1,000 procedural tools of a man who had survived 64 years by never giving anyone a clean image of him doing anything. He would resist that way going forward. But tonight, he walked out of the Meridian Hotel with federal agents, and he did not look back. The attorney gathered his papers and left behind them, already on his phone. The room was quiet. Adrian and Evelyn stood on opposite sides of the table. The ledger folder was still in front of him. He hadn't moved it. He looked at it for a moment, then at her. 4 days, he said. Yes, you were alive. Yes, he looked at the scar on her jaw. She watched him look at it, the particular quality of attention a person gives to evidence of damage they believe themselves responsible for. His face did not perform guilt. It carried it, which was different and worse. I thought. He stopped. When the platform, he stopped again. Pressed 2 fingers against his mouth briefly. An involuntary gesture. The body's way of catching something before it came out wrong. I stood there and I watched it, and Adrian. He looked at her. I need you to testify, she said. The silence stretched. That's what you need from me right now. That's what I need from you right now, she confirmed. Marsh has the financial records. She has Vivian's recantation. She has the ledger page from Vivian's safe. But the original ledger, the full document, is in that folder in front of you, and it has your hands on it, and your presence at this table. And that is either evidence of cooperation or evidence of complicity, and right now, tonight, you get to decide which one it is. His hands were still flat on the table on either side of the folder. If I testify, he said. If you testify, the original ledger goes into federal evidence with a clean chain of custody from a cooperative witness. If you don't, it goes in as a document recovered from the scene of a meeting that was being conducted with your father's attorney at the moment of arrest. She held his eyes. One of those stories ends with you as someone who chose to do the right thing when it cost him something. The other ends with you as someone who sat in a room trying to negotiate with the evidence. I wasn't negotiating, he said. I know. I have been sitting in this room for 2 hours because I couldn't. He pushed back from the table, one sharp movement, turning away, one hand on the back of his neck. I have been sitting here because the man who killed James is my father, because I have been inside his organization my entire adult life, because the ledger in that folder is going to take down every structure I've spent 15 years building, and I have been sitting in this room trying to understand what that means. He turned back to face her. Not trying to save him, he said, trying to understand what I become after. She looked at him for a long moment. I don't know what you become after, she said. Nobody knows that before they go through it. Pulled the chair nearest to her and sat down because she was exhausted deeply physically, the kind of tired that had been accumulating for 6 days and could not be managed indefinitely, and because she was done performing steadiness she didn't entirely have. What I know is that there's a federal agent in the corridor who needs that folder and your signature on a cooperation agreement by midnight. He sat back down across from her. He opened the folder. He looked at the ledger, not the single page from Vivian's safe, the full document, 40-odd pages of transactions that covered 15 years of Minjae Vale's operational history. He turned pages slowly, not reading each entry but moving through the document, the way you move through something you've already accepted at depth and are now only verifying at the surface. He stopped at one page. She could see the date from across the table, 7 years ago. He closed the folder. Call Agent Marsh back in, he said. She called her. Marsh came back in with a cooperation agreement and a recorder and spent the next 40 minutes taking Adrian's preliminary statement. Evelyn sat at the end of the table and listened and said nothing. The statement was thorough and unsparing. Adrian Vale, who had spent his entire career knowing exactly how to give people the minimum required, gave Marsh everything. The Geneva meeting he had not known about, which he had discovered 6 days ago through his own investigation. The false paternity report and how it had been presented to him as independent verification. The succession documents' terms. Min Jae's specific operational role in the lighthouse, which Adrian had confirmed through communication logs on his father's secondary phone, a phone Min Jae didn't know Adrian knew about. And James. Adrian's voice did not change when he talked about James. It stayed level, factual, covering what he knew and how he knew it. But his hands, flat on the table, pressed harder against the surface as he spoke, until the color left his knuckles entirely. Marsh was a professional. She did not acknowledge the knuckles. Evelyn did not look away from them. When Marsh left at 11:40 with the folder and the recorder and everything she had come for, the meeting suite was empty except for the two of them and the untouched water glasses and the city lights outside. Silence was different now. The weight of active crisis had lifted and left behind the weight of what the active crisis had cost, which was harder to carry because it did not require immediate action. It just required being in the room with it. Adrian looked at the window. The nursery, he said. I went back to look at it. After the hospital. Before he stopped. The card. I took it, she said. He looked at her. From your jacket. The morning after the hospital. I went back to the estate and I took it. She paused. It's in the Atlantic now. I was wearing it when I went in. He was quiet. I wrote it 3 weeks ago, she said. I had a dinner planned. I was going to tell you that night. I know. He pressed one hand against his face briefly, the same gesture as before, catching something. I know you were. I found the reservation confirmation on your phone 3 days ago when I was going through your things. He stopped on that. That's what people do when they think someone is gone. They go through things. I didn't know what else to do with my hands. She said nothing. You had the place booked for 7:30, he said. That small Italian place on the west side that you liked because the owner didn't know who I was and treated you like a regular person. He makes good tiramisu. He does. Adrian's voice was very quiet. I sat in that restaurant at 7:30 on a Tuesday night, 2 days after the lighthouse, and I ate dinner alone because I didn't know what else to do. I don't know why I went. I think I thought. He shook his head. I don't know what I thought. She looked at him sitting across from her, the man she had shared a bed with for 2 years, who had walked into a hospital holding a police report, who had pulled a lever above the Atlantic, who had sat alone in an Italian restaurant on a Tuesday. All of those things were true simultaneously. She had learned in the last 6 days that people were not saw cleanly. There were several stories told at the same time, and some of those stories were ones you could not reconcile with love, and some of them you could not reconcile with fury. And some of them you just carried, because putting them down did not make them stop being true. I failed you, he said, multiple times, in specific documentable ways. He said it without asking her to respond to it, just placing it on the table between them, the way he had placed his hands beside the ledger folder. I failed you, and Noah and I have been sitting inside that fact for 6 days, and I'm not going to ask you to do anything with it. I just needed to say it to your face. I know you failed me, she said. I don't need you to say it. I needed to say it. Okay. He looked at her. What do you need? She thought about this honestly. Right now, she said. I need to sleep for about 16 hours. I need to eat something that isn't whatever Marcus leaves outside doors. And I need to know that Charles Laurent is being picked up tonight and not tomorrow. Marcia's team went to the Laurent estate 20 minutes ago, Adrian said. I heard it on Marcia's radio as she was leaving. Good. Vivian. Vivian is already in federal custody. She gave a written recantation 2 hours ago. Evelyn folded her hands on the table. Her fear of being replaced is not a defense, but it is context. The court will decide what to do with it. And me? She looked at him steadily. You cooperated, she said. You gave them everything. What happens next is between you and Marcia's office and whatever agreement they reach. She paused. I can't tell you what you become after this, Adrian. I told you that already. He nodded. The investigation that followed the arrests of Min-Jae Vale and Charles Laurent took 11 months. 11 months of depositions, evidence processing, financial forensics, and the particular grinding patience required when a case involves men who have spent decades building structures specifically designed to be difficult to dismantle from the outside. They had good attorneys. The attorneys filed motions. The motions were answered. The process was slow and exhausting and frequently maddening, and there were weeks when Evelyn sat in Marcia's office going through documents for 5 hours and came out feeling like she had built something solid, and then arrived the next morning to find a procedural challenge had undermined the foundation, and she had to start that section again. She did not stop. She had spent enough of her life stopping when things became too difficult, and then paying the price of having stopped. She was not interested in that pattern anymore. Graham Mercer was arrested in the 6th week. He had been living under a different name in a coastal city, 3 states south, working a logistics job, believing that distance and time were sufficient cover. They were not. He gave a detailed confession within 48 hours of his arrest, because Graham Mercer was not a man built for the specific discomfort of federal custody, and his confession provided the documentary link between Min-Jae's physician and the fraudulent paternity report that had been one of the cleanest constructed pieces of the conspiracy. Dr. Pierce Holman, Min-Jae's physician, surrendered his medical license and cooperated fully in exchange for reduced charges. The men who had operated the lighthouse, the 2 contractors who had brought Evelyn to the coast and rigged the platforms, were located and arrested within 72 hours of the Meridian Hotel. They provided names of the people who had hired them, which added 3 additional entries to Marcia's arrest log and extended the investigation's scope into 2 states it had not originally covered. Carver was arrested in the 3rd month. He had not run, which surprised Marcus and did not surprise Evelyn, because Carver was the kind of man who had spent so long believing he was invisible inside other people's systems that he had stopped accounting for the possibility that someone would rebuild those systems from scratch specifically to find him. Saul gave testimony about the infrastructure compromise that was precise enough and technical enough that it took the court 2 additional expert witnesses and 1 continuance to fully absorb it. But when it was absorbed, it held. Vivian pleaded guilty. Her attorney presented the context, the childhood, inside a family that had used fear of replacement as a management tool, the years of being told that her position was conditional, Charles's specific role in directing her behavior from the beginning. The court considered it. The judge acknowledged it in sentencing remarks that were careful and precise and did not constitute absolution. Vivian received a sentence that included prison time. She looked at Evelyn once, across the courtroom, before she was taken out. Evelyn looked back. She did not look away, and she did not perform anything. She just looked, the way you look at something that is true and terrible and cannot be unmade. Vivian turned away first. Charles Laurent was convicted on 6 counts, including conspiracy, fraud, and charges relating to the kidnapping operation at the lighthouse. The charge covering Evelyn's disappearance at age 6, the original erasure. The payment that had been uncovered in Marcus's first round of financial records required a separate proceeding, but that proceeding happened, and the documentary evidence was sufficient. Charles maintained throughout his trial that everything he had done was in the interest of the family. The jury deliberated for 9 hours. Min-Jae Vale's trial was separate, longer, more technically complex, and resulted in convictions on 7 counts. The ledger, Adrian's ledger, the full 40-page document, was admitted as evidence and formed the backbone of the prosecution's case for the charge relating to James. Adrian testified. He sat in the witness chair for 4 hours across 2 sessions. He answered every question without deflection and without the particular performance of remorse that defense attorneys sometimes coached cooperative witnesses to deliver for the jury. He was simply factual, thorough, exact. When the prosecutor asked him why he had come forward given the cost to himself and his organization, he paused for a moment long enough that the court reporter shifted in her seat, and then he said, "I had enough information to know that people had been hurt and that I was the only person with the specific evidence required to prove it. Acting would cost me. Not acting would cost more people. That was the whole math." He resigned from the Vale family organization the week after his testimony. He did not ask Evelyn's opinion on this. He told her afterward, at the end of a courthouse day, when they had both given statements to the same prosecutor in adjoining rooms and had encountered each other in the corridor afterward. He told her the way you tell someone something that is yours to decide, and that you are telling them because you have decided, and not because you are asking. She said, "Okay." He said, "I don't know what I'm building next." She said, "You'll figure it out." He looked at her in the corridor for a moment. He looked at the scar on her jaw, which had faded from dark to silver over 11 months, but had not disappeared and would not disappear. "Are you okay?" he asked. She thought about this honestly, which was something she had been practicing with intention. For 11 months, the honest answer, rather than the functional answer. "I'm getting there," she said. He nodded. He did not ask what there meant or when she expected to arrive. He accepted the answer as complete. That was the most he had offered her that felt like something new. She placed her inherited Laurent shares under independent trusteeship 3 weeks after Charles's conviction. The trustee was Dara, the property law specialist above the dry cleaners, with the reading glasses on the chain and the posture of someone who had stopped apologizing for what bending cost her. Dara agreed to manage the trust on the condition that its proceeds went toward a foundation structure that Evelyn had been quietly designing for 4 months. The foundation worked with missing children and with women in the process of leaving controlled environments. It did not advertise itself prominently. It had a small staff and a specific focus, and it operated through referral networks rather than public campaigns because Evelyn had learned from her own history that the women who most needed help were frequently the ones who would not walk through a door with a bright sign above it. She chose its name deliberately. Not for Noah, she was not ready to put his name on anything that would be seen by people who didn't already know what it meant. The name she chose was quieter than that. The Foundation for Independent Standing. Marcus had looked at the name for a long time when she showed him the paperwork. "It's quiet," he said. "It's supposed to be. It fits you." That was the idea. He looked at her over the paperwork. He had been beside her for 11 months, in the way he had been beside her at the boathouse present, available, not filling the space she hadn't asked him to fill. He had given her information when she asked for it. He had given her space when she needed it. He had once, in the 7th month, made her dinner in the apartment above the hardware store that she was still renting because she had not yet decided where she wanted to go next, and they had eaten it together at the small table by the window without talking very much. And when he left, he had asked if it was all right that he had come. She had said yes. He had asked the same question the next time. She had said yes again. The question mattered more than the answer, and they both understood this, and it was the beginning of something that was not the same as the things that had come before it in her life. Slower, more deliberate. Built on a foundation that had been checked and rechecked, and still might shift in ways neither of them had planned for. She did not know where it would go. She did not know if she wanted to know. 1 year after the lighthouse, she visited the Memorial Garden. It was a small space, private, on a hillside outside the city. She had arranged it herself in the 4th month after the investigation began, when she understood that the legal process would take time, but the need to have somewhere to go did not wait for legal processes. She had planted low things, nothing that would require maintenance she couldn't guarantee. A stone with a name on it. Noah Cross, she had used her name. Not Vale, hers. She was standing at the stone on a Tuesday morning in early November when she heard footsteps on the path behind her. She knew the sound. She had learned his footstep over 2 years of sharing a house with him, and you did not unlearn that kind of thing, simply because you wanted to. Adrian stopped a few feet behind her. He was thinner than he had been, and his face had aged in the specific way faces age, when a person has spent a year carrying something without putting it down. He was not wearing the kind of clothing he used to wear: no suit, no organization. Just a jacket and jeans, and the particular simplicity of a man who has stopped needing to look like something. "I didn't know you'd be here today," he said. "I come on Tuesdays. I come on Thursdays." A pause. "I didn't know that was." He stopped. "I'm sorry, I can come back." "It's okay," she said. "You can stay." He came to stand beside her. Not close, a few feet of distance, respectful. The distance of someone who has learned what overstepping costs and is no longer willing to pay it without permission. They stood at the stone in silence. "He would have been 11 months old," she said. "Yes. He would have been figuring out walking. Probably falling a lot." She kept her eyes on the stone. "You would have been a disaster about it." He made a sound. Not quite a laugh. "Something adjacent to one. Probably," he said. She reached into her jacket pocket. She had been carrying the card for 11 months, not the original, which was in the Atlantic, but a copy she had written from memory on the morning after the Meridian Hotel, the morning after she had slept for 14 hours straight and woken in the apartment above the hardware store, with the particular clarity that comes after long exhaustion. She had written it from memory because she remembered every word of the original, and she had not been ready to let the words go entirely. She had been carrying the copy since. She held it out to him. He took it. He read it. He held it for a long moment without looking up. "You wrote this," he said. "Not a question." "Yes." "Before. 3 weeks before. At the kitchen table at 7 in the morning while you were still asleep." She looked at the stone again. "I had been planning to tell you that night. I had the restaurant booked. I had the card in my pocket." He folded the card carefully. He held it in both hands, the way you hold something fragile that you are not going to put down. She waited for him to give it back. He did not give it back. She looked at him. "I loved you," he said. It came out quiet and straightforward, no performance. Just the fact of it, stated simply. "I know," she said. "I loved you and I failed you. I know that too. Both things are true." "Yes," she said, "both things are true." She turned to face him. "I loved you too, Adrian." "That's also true." She let him have that. She did not qualify it or bracket it or explain the tense it was in. All of those things are true at the same time, and none of them fix what happened. He held her gaze. He did not argue with this, did not reach for a version of it that was softer or more navigable. He held it the way he had held the card, carefully, without putting it down. "I know," he said. She turned back to the stone. They stood there for a while longer. Long enough for the morning light to shift. Long enough for a bird to arrive and leave the nearby tree. Long enough for both of them to simply be present in the place where Noah's name was written on something permanent. Then she took her wedding ring from her left jacket pocket. She had been carrying it, too, since the hospital. Not wearing it, she had not put it back on, since the day she set it on the bedside table beside the bracelet. But she had carried it, because throwing it away felt like a declaration she wasn't ready to make, and wearing it felt like a lie she wasn't interested in telling herself. She held it in her palm for a moment. Then she placed it in Adrian's hand beside the folded card. He looked at it. "I'm not giving it back as a rejection," she said. "I'm giving it back because it belongs to a version of things that ended. And I think you should have it, because what it means isn't nothing." She looked at his hands. "It's just not mine to carry anymore." He closed his fingers around it. He did not ask for another chance. He did not ask what came next. He stood there with a ring and a card in his closed fist, and he accepted what she had given him for what it was. For the first time in as long as she had known him, he left the choice entirely in her hands and did not try to renegotiate its terms. She appreciated this more than she could have told him. She walked back down the path alone. Marcus was outside the gate. He was standing beside the car with his hands in his pockets and his eyes on the hillside, not watching for her exactly, just being nearby in the way he had learned to be nearby, without making nearness into a claim. He did not ask what happened inside the gate. She came out and stood beside him for a moment, and they both looked at the hillside together. Then she said, "Walk with me." He fell into step beside her. They walked the path along the outside of the garden wall, through the November light, through the cold that smelled like the season turning over into whatever came after. She did not take his arm. He did not offer it. They simply walked together with the particular easiness of two people who had learned to occupy the same space without needing to define what the space meant every time they were in it. Months later, the foundation held a small opening event for its expanded offices. A third floor they had taken on, after the first year of operations, had made clear that the referral volume exceeded what the original space could handle. It was not a gala. It was not the kind of event that required a dress or a speech. It was staff and partners, and a few of the women the foundation had helped who wanted to be there, and a table with food that people actually ate, and a room that felt like something that was going to be used, rather than something that was going to be photographed, and then forgotten. On the wall near the entrance, mounted in a small plain frame, was the emergency beacon, or what remained of it, a cracked flat disc, salt-damaged, the casing split on one side where the impact with the water had stressed it. Marcus had found it washed up on the coast 3 weeks after the lighthouse. He had driven it to the apartment above the hardware store and left it outside the door with a note that said only, "Thought you should have this." She had kept it ever since. Visitors sometimes stopped at it. Sometimes they asked. Her answer never changed, because I was still holding it when they pulled me out. She carried the scar on her jaw. She carried the grief for Noah, which did not diminish exactly, but changed its shape over time the way grief does when you stop fighting it and allow it to simply be part of the architecture of who you are. She carried the memory of a car going over a bridge in the rain and of waking in a hospital room with her hands reaching for something that was not there. She carried all of it, but none of it told her what to do or where to go or who to be. None of it had her name. On a morning in January, 14 months after the lighthouse, Evelyn Cross walked through the foundation's glass doors into the pale winter light. No wedding ring, no family ledger, no permission from anyone who had ever believed they could define the boundaries of her life. She pulled her coat against the cold. She walked forward. Her name belonged entirely to her.